Thank you very much. I'd like to call the Lakewood City Council meeting of March 16th, 2026 to order. Ms. Schumacher, could you please call the roll?
Councilmember Brandstetter.
Here.
Councilmember Lauricella has been excused. Councilmember Lindholm.
Here.
Pearson.
Here.
Councilmember Talbot.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Bell.
Here.
And Mayor Boki.
Here.
You have a
Please, thank you very much. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you very much. So tonight we have the pleasure of a business showcase for Lakewood Auto Body. So would Mr. Andy Mueller please come on down to the podium and I will read in, we'll tell you all about Lakewood Auto Body. Well, sir, how are you? Paul, nice to meet you. Thank you for being here tonight. Lakewood Auto Body has been family owned and operated here in Lakewood since 1964. It was founded by Creighton Mueller, who brought his early passion for rebuilding cars from San Diego to Lakewood after serving at Fort Lewis. Lakewood Auto Body continues to serve the Lakewood community through youth program sponsorships and by providing quality, trusted service. Mr. Mueller, congratulations, Mrs. Mueller. Welcome, and I'd like to say a few words.
What I like to say?
Yeah, would you please?
Oh, gee, it's just,
Make it a good effort.
I must say my father would be probably pretty proud of the situation. I could tell you Pacific Highway when he got here was pretty much a dirt road. I-5 wasn't even thought of. The across the street used to be a little steakhouse. When Gallup and Gertie happened, he watched Pacific Highway kind of do the roll. And then the progression of vehicles these days, I must ask if you can make them not so safe. There's not so many crashes out there in these days. So if we could get maybe when roundabouts disappear a little bit, but at the end of the day, we would like to say thank you to the community. Very much so. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll come down here for a picture.
Mayor.
I'd also like to note that most businesses don't last as long as the one your family owns. A number of the city council members were not even alive when the business started. So that's even more remarkable, I think. So anyway, a couple of us were, so. Yes.
Mayor. And Mayor, before we move on to the next item, we do have the video of the business showcase to share.
Got my next line. I forgot my next line. We do have a video.
My name is Michael Campion, and this is Lakewood Auto Body. Well, Dad started the company back in 1964 when he was stationed up here. He really liked working on cars. He'd been doing it since 1955 down in San Diego. He was one of the original customizers and got shipped up here, found a spot, and started doing work for people. Lakewood Auto Body has sponsored just about every sporting event type for kids. in the area for the last many decades. We do baseball, soccer, Cub Scouts, all the different activities for kids. We just appreciate the community supporting us for all these years, and we hope that they continue to do so. We'll do the best job that we can to keep them coming.
Thank you very much for all that you've done for our community and your success through all these years. And we wish you success in future years also. Thank you. Oh,
We can do it again.
she's the found. Hey, welcome. What do we want to do? Should we do another pic? Thank you very much. Next is public comment. Public comments are accepted by mail, email, or by live, virtual, or in-person comment. Send comments in advance by mail or email to Brianna Schumacher, City Clerk at 6000 Main Street Southwest, Lakewood, Washington 98499, or B. Schumacher at cityoflakewood.us. Comments received up to 1 hour before the meeting have been provided to the City Council electronically. Ms. Schumacher, can you read the names of any of those who have submitted comments in advance?
Mayor, we received written comments in advance from Tricia Parsons.
Tricia Parsons. Okay, so we have received that. So please announce, the audience may comment on items relating to any matter related to city business under the public comments period. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. If you'd like to provide live virtual public comments, you will need to join the Zoom meeting as an attendee by calling telephone 1-253-215-8782 and enter meeting ID 868-7263-2373. Or visit zoom.us and enter meeting ID 868-7263-2373. Upon entering the meeting, please enter your name. Use the raise hand feature to be called upon. For those participating by calling in by telephone, to use the raise hand feature, press *9 on your phone. When you're unmuted, please provide your name and city of residence. Each speaker will be allowed 3 minutes to speak. Outside of public comments, all attendees on Zoom will continue to have the ability to virtually raise your hand for the duration of the meeting, but you will not be acknowledged and your microphone will remain muted except when you are called upon. So I'd like to start tonight with the Zoom. Do we have anybody online, Ms. Schumacher?
Mayor, first we have Tishamir Dunlop.
Mr. Dunlop? The floor is yours.
Can you hear me? Oh, hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello. I just wanted to make a quick public comment regarding sidewalks. I've noticed that there have been a lot of sidewalk projects around the city that have required oak trees to be cut down and other trees too. But they make the sidewalk, and then you look at the sidewalk, every day for years after they make it, and you don't really see people walking on a lot of the sidewalks. And it really makes me wonder, trees are one of the most important things we have in the city, and is it really worth it to make sidewalks in areas which were already pretty okay for pedestrians to begin with, when hardly ever anyone is even going to use the sidewalks that they make? So it seems like a kind of a questionable use of funds, and I just want to point out that it doesn't seem to me. I mean, maybe they are doing this, but to my knowledge, before sidewalks are made, there don't seem to be any studies on how many people are actually pedestrians in that area per day, per week beforehand. So yeah, it might be a good idea to do some research on whether or not sidewalks are actually worth making before one destroys hundreds of year old trees to make some concrete that nobody's going to use. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunlop. Are there any other callers online, Ms. Schumacher?
Mayor, there are no other virtual attendees at this time.
Thank you very much. Then we will come in person. You have 3 minutes. The first speaker I have on the list here is Ms. Linda Smith. Ms. Smith, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. How are you this evening? My name is Linda Smith, and I'm here on behalf of the Lakewood Chamber of Commerce to express our strong opposition to a B&O tax targeting the warehousing industry. Since incorporation, Lakewood has intentionally chosen not to impose a B&O tax on business. That policy has given our city leverage to be more attractive for investment, job creation, and economic growth. Our business community is facing an unprecedented wave of new costs from multiple levels of government. Locally, many businesses were hit with substantial increases under West Pierce Fire and Rescue's new fire benefit charge. While the new system was intended to be more equitable, the shift to a formula based on building size, use, and risk resulted in dramatic cost increases for many commercial properties, especially Lakewood Industrial Park. For many employers, especially small and mid-sized businesses, these cumulative impacts are real and immediate. Unlike many other taxes, the B&O tax is levied on gross receipts rather than profits. This means businesses must pay the tax even when margins are thin or when they are operating at a loss. I don't know why I just got so nervous here. A B&O tax effectively penalizes job creators and investment at the very moment when Lakewood should be encouraging economic growth. While the Chamber does not support tax increases lightly, the 0.1% public safety sales tax spreads the responsibility broadly across the community, including the visiting public. A 1% per $10 spent has an impact on individual purchases, which is relatively low. While the Chamber recognizes the city's legal obligation to fund indigent defense services, we believe that careful prioritization, efficiency, and cost management must remain part of the conversation. Lakewood's success has been built on a partnership between the city and its business community. Let's not abandon the policy that has helped our city grow. If public safety protects everyone, then everyone should share in supporting it, not just the employers who already help power Lakewood's economy. Strong businesses create strong communities. Policies that protect and support employers ultimately benefit every resident of Lakewood. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Mr. Chris Kaufman. Chris, you have 3 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, I'm Chris Kaufman. This is a follow-up to a program we had a couple weeks ago on recognizing the transition team folks. And I was privileged to be part of that. I wanted to follow up and recognize 3 additional people that cannot be here for that recognition. My background, I've lived in Lakewood for 55 years intentionally, and I did chair the Public Works Transition Team prior to cityhood, and my late wife and I did work with Bill and a number of other people on getting the favorable vote for cityhood over 30 years ago. People I want to recognize are our first, Bill Larkin. He was one of the 22 people on my transition team, Public Works. And Bill was the roads engineer for the city of Tacoma. And he later, when the city of Lakewood got into a position to have a Public Works section, was city engineer. So he was our first city engineer. Next, I want to recognize Ed Starbird, and Colonel Starbird had a significant background in the Corps of Engineers, and including district engineer, and his last assignment in the Corps was with the I-Corps here at Fort Lewis, and he and his family settled here, and some of you may or may not remember, he had, of his 5 kids, one was named Kate, and she was a good basketball player, so people tend to remember Kate, not necessarily Ed. But Ed was a pretty good kayaker too, and I managed to get him to agree to write our report. And I think he did a tremendous job. We had a lot of information that we gathered with 22 people over a few months on the transition between Tacoma and its public works and the county and its effort in this area. And last, I want to recognize my wife at that time, Sylvia. She handled 2 transition teams, the Parks and the Health and Human Services. And again, they put together excellent reviews and reports. I would recommend the reports to you. I got out with her a little bit, and the status of our parks before cityhood was abysmal. It really was. And what the city has done since cityhood is remarkable. Appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kaufman. I note that documented the sad shape. So thank you. Up next is Ms. Haley Ivy. Ms. Ivy.
Hello.
You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again. I am bringing up again Sealy Lake and Edgewater Park today as a mention of the all-encompassing problem that I'm seeing with Lakewood. And I do have to start by saying I love being a resident of Lakewood so far because of the trees that I get to see around me and because I go to these parks. Edgewater Park specifically. I get to see Lake Steilacoom. I get to see the sunset. I get to hear the birds over there. So when I say that, I am declaring that the Lakewood parks are in a state of emergency. We are so overdeveloped as a city that any more development is extremely close to ridding the entire town of Lakewood of its already severely diminished natural areas. So last time I had talked about Sealy Lake, because the educational sign put at the beginning of the trailhead says how you can help protect the Chambers Clover Creek watershed. It is to preserve the natural vegetation and to reduce paved services, which is the exact opposite of what Lakewood is doing, unfortunately. And I bring up these parks in protest of their current conditions because if Sealy Lake is considered to be a crucial wetland for Lakewood, then why are there rusted shopping carts in there? Why is there garbage of all sides on the sides of the trail, on the trail, with ducks and birds just hanging out with all this trash? The trees are completely choked up with ivy. It looks like the apocalypse at this park, and I just don't think anybody's really catching it that can help us do something about it. And so then brings me back over to Edgewater Park, which I go to every day, which is also covered with trash. There's trash along the water's edge. There's no real place for the ducks and geese to go anymore, so they kind of just all poop in the same little sliver spot at Edgewater Park, which is really just a sign that they don't have very many places to go, because all around all of the lakes in Lakewood, it's all private docks. So we have Edgewater Park as being undeveloped considered. And so there is the Shoreline Master Plan Program hearing coming up, which also states in Chapter 1A, it mentions control of pollution, prevention of damage to the environment, and to protect natural shorelines. So when you are leaving these places in disarray with garbage and overgrown invasive species, and then with this hearing on Wednesday, it's talking about paving over Edgewater Park with a walking path, which if you go to Edgewater Park, it's not very big at all. Just adding more pavement. So why I just plead with Lakewood, what is the obsession with development over the lakes and the woods? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ivy. Ms. Helen Wagner. Welcome, Ms. Wagner. You have 3 minutes. You can pull that down.
Thank you. It's working. Okay. Tree code. It is a great idea, and since it has pages and pages long, 30 pages, it looks as though it should protect our trees. However, the document is merely cosmetic. If it were not so, we would not find it necessary to defend each large Gary oak whenever a developer wishes to cut it down. The most obvious thing that I notice is that if someone wants to build, it is very easy to circumvent the most basic rules, that is, designated to preserve trees, especially oaks, in order to fix things for humans. The chances are that long after the project in question has been removed to make way for the next construction, the tree in question would still be alive, probably even after our grandchildren are gone. We need to remember that trees are living things. I noticed that there is a formula for how many significant trees per acre may be felled per year. Is that preserving the canopy? Any way you look at it, the trees lose. There are so many ways to sneak around the basic goal, tree preservation, that boggles the mind. We need to cut the nonsense, stop putting business ahead of environment, both trees and ecology in general, and develop a system that is mindful of the benefits that trees provide. After all, those benefits are stated at the beginning of the tree code. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wagner. Next up, I believe that's James Dunlop. I believe that's your signature, Mr. Dunlop. Mr. Dunlop, you have 3 minutes.
James Dunlop, Lakewood resident. We all agree that public comments are an important Lakewood institution. And as a foreigner, I appreciate the United States' First Amendment and my ability to say largely whatever I like within the 3 minutes given to me by the city of Lakewood. However, most Lakewood residents don't make public comments. And if you look back at the minutes since 1996, you see that more often than not, there are only 1 or 2 public comments per city council meeting. In fact, the only person you could rely on to make a public comment was Dennis Haugen. When he lived in the area, he turned up in person, and often after he moved to South Dakota, he continued to call in with his thoughts and diatribes. Then the comments stopped. This is because Dennis Haugen died at the age of 82 on December the 19th, 2025. Maybe this is common knowledge, but I only just heard the news. On most subjects, I disagreed with Dennis Haugen, though there was no doubt that he cared very much about his country. The themes of his comments included mass immigration, the brilliance of Governor Kristi Noem, the fentanyl epidemic, and the parlous state of America's education system. According to one source, he was so keen to make his point that at least on one occasion, he came to a council meeting with a TV set in tow, showing reportage from Fox News. Dennis Haugen was born on August 15th, 1943 in Minnesota. He grew up on a farm and he was used to a world of tractors and horses. He studied theology before moving to the Puget Sound area, where he had a business installing septic tanks. Then he worked in real estate before becoming a longshoreman at the Port of Seattle until he was well into his 70s. Clearly, he was a man with an incredible work ethic. In terms of political engagement, Dennis Haugen should be an example to all of us. He expressed his views with conviction and clarity, and he believed, I assume, that it was important to be heard. We should follow his example and take every opportunity to make a public comment until the day we die.
Thank you, Mr. Dunlop. Christina Minetti, Ms. Minetti. Ms. Minetti, it looks like you're down twice, so you're going to speak for the Gary Oak Coalition first.
Yeah, it's written in the organization slot.
Okay.
Christina Minetti, Lakewood, seems really. During the pandemic, when mowing stopped, an acquaintance saw that something remarkable happened at the corner of John Dower Road in Custer. Camas flowers bloomed, beautiful splashes of sapphire blue. This amazing sight wasn't just pretty, it was historically and ecologically significant. Camas is a prairie indicator species. Its presence tells us that the land still retains elements of the Gary Oak prairie ecosystem, one of the rarest ecosystems in North America. For thousands of years, this landscape was actively maintained by indigenous people through regular use of fire. Burning prevented Douglas fir encroachment and encouraged the growth of prairie plants like camas. Camas was also central to the native food economy of this region. The bulbs were harvested and cooked as a staple starch, much the way we rely on potatoes today. Entire cultural traditions and seasonal gatherings revolved around camas harvests. When we see camas blooming here in Lakewood, which is virtually never, we are seeing a living connection to that history. What amazes me most is that these plants are still here at all. The camas appeared after more than a century of settlement, after decades of routine mowing, and the complete absence of the fire management that once sustained the system. Yet the plants are still trying to grow. In a sense, they are telling us that the prairie is not entirely gone. It's simply waiting for someone to give it a chance. Earlier today, I spoke with the principal of Dower Elementary School, whose campus includes the Gary Oak habitat at that corner. I asked whether the area could be left unmowed so that the camas might bloom again. She seemed genuinely interested, but unaware that the school grounds contain part of one of the rarest ecosystems in North America. I'm here to encourage the City of Lakewood to expand public education about our native habitats, what they are, why they matter, and how residents can help protect them. Please let me know how I can help, of course. The city can also lead by encouraging less pavement, more native planting. I know that you're planting some native plants in the park plans now and stuff, but anyway, by showing residents how to rewild their yards to help the birds and wildlife that still call Lakewood home. After all these years, the camas and oaks are still trying to survive. Please help them. This is all happening on your watch. And the second comment is on behalf of the Gary Oak Coalition. Christina Minetti, Gary Oak Coalition, we are asking you to request that the Custer Road sidewalk project next to Dower Elementary be redesigned so that no Gary Oaks are harmed or removed. Apparently, the city staff responsible for this project has not yet been informed of the need to protect the Gary Oaks. According to the schematic I received, 3 Gary Oaks would be cut down, 2 about 12 inches in diameter at breast height and 1 about 14 inches. I was told that one of them has a double trunk, but this is not even shown in the drawing I was given. These trees may not look large, but Gary Oaks grow extremely slowly, about 15 to 20 years for every inch of diameter. That means that these oaks could easily be 180 to nearly 300 years old. To understand what that age means, consider the Tensler Douglas fir, whose section sits in the park now. That fir was 586 years old and is 12 feet 9 inches in diameter. That's 153 inches. A Gary oak that old would be just about 29 to 39 inches. That's the size of some of the oaks that the city has allowed to be cut down recently for the Tillicum path. The only reason that these oaks do not look enormous is that they grow really slowly, but the age and ecological value are just as real. And for this particular ecosystem, one of the rarest in North America, I'm saying that the 3rd time tonight, it's even more important. Gary oaks are also a keystone species in this ecosystem. That means that several hundred other species depend on them for habitat and food. Remove the oaks and the web of life around them begins to collapse. Habitat biologist Darren Masters, whom I think you know, has also explained that Gary oaks growing close together like these often grow even more slowly because they compete with one another. He said that Gary oaks only 3 to 4 inches in diameter can already be hundreds of years old. The best available science is clear. WDFW's management recommendations 1998 states the west of the Cascades, Gary oaks should not be removed except for stand enhancement. A sidewalk is not stand enhancement. State law requires that land use decisions follow best available science. There is also already a sidewalk on the other side of Custer Road, built when this area was still under Pierce County jurisdiction, and it was carefully designed around a clump of oaks to save them. Engineers then understood that when you encounter Gary oaks, you design differently. Across the world, we are watching species and ecosystems disappear at a rate never seen before in human history. The responsible thing is to protect the ones that we have here surviving. A sidewalk can be redesigned in a matter of hours. The city has its own oak protections in the code. It has made Gary oak the official city tree. Please now ask that the sidewalk project be redesigned so these valuable oaks can live. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Minetti. Mr. Abraham Marjalili. Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, good evening to the member of the council and the public. As you know, I am a City of Lakewood resident. And before I start, I wanted to thank the Mayor Bucci because he has been very kind and pleasant. Unlike the past, I think that if we didn't have that situation, in our case, probably we wouldn't be here as we are. But regardless, I wanted to ask for a minute of silence because of the 168 innocent little girls who were murdered in their school with their students, with their teachers by being not once, but twice attacked in MENA of Iran. Let's hope those who are responsible brought to justice now that this innocent case could not be brought back. I came here during the last few years that I have been coming here. When there was a carnage going in Gaza, asked the city council twice to ask for ceasefire. Never did anything. This is where we end up to be. And I'm afraid it's gonna get worse. This council, this city is representing me and my city of residence. I urge you to condemn this action so it never be repeated again, and those who are responsible be brought to justice. Thank you very much for your understanding. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marjolili. Okay, that is everybody who signed up. But anybody else here tonight who would like to make public comments, you can come up to the microphone and you've got 3 minutes. Is there anyone else who would like to make public comment this evening? Okay, so at that, I am going to close public comment. And Ms. Schumacher, we will go on to the consent agenda.
Consent agenda A, approval of the minutes of the city council meeting of March 2nd, 2026. B, motion number 2026-21, authorizing the execution of an agreement with SCJ Alliance in the amount of $100,000 for the Camp Murray Boat Launch Master Plan. C, motion number 2026-22, updating the 2026 Planning Commission Work Plan. D, items filed in the office of the city clerk. 1, Arts Commission meeting minutes of February 9th, 2026. 2, Planning Commission meeting minutes of February 18th, 2026.
Thank you, Ms. Schumacher. Are there any members who would like any item on the consent agenda removed for separate consideration? Councilmember Brandstetter.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to remove item B.
Item D?
B.
B, okay. B, that's motion number 2026-21.
Yep.
Okay, so we now have removed a motion number 2026-21. Are there any other items that any other members of the council would like removed from the consent agenda? Okay, with that, could I get a motion to approve the consent agenda? So moved. It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as with the removal of motion number 2026-21. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. The consent agenda as amended is approved. So now we will go on to motion number 2026-21. Ms. Schumacher, could you read it in, please?
Motion number 2026-21, authorizing the execution of an agreement with SCJ Alliance in the amount of $100,000 for the Camp Murray Boat Launch Master Plan.
Thank you, Ms. Schumacher. Could we get someone to move it so that we could have discussion?
So moved, Mayor. Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Motion number 2026-21. Mr. Brandstetter, Councilmember Brandstetter, would you like to speak to it?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. In the request for council action, it discusses that the contract that this motion approves is designed to fulfill the memorandum of understanding agreement entered by the city and the Washington Military Department to define site improvements and to improve the boat launch area for a variety of reasons. I'm concerned that the scope of work in the contract doesn't fulfill that piece. And when I look at the memorandum of understanding, it specifically talks about that while the city of Lakewood is going to fund and take the lead, that there is a section that says the city of Lakewood and the Washington Military Department will collaborate throughout the study to ensure boat launch improvements address Camp Murray operational needs and missions. And I don't see that function in the state of work of the contract. The military department is essentially relegated to just being one of a group of other stakeholders that will several times be consulted, but that falls short of a collaboration throughout the study. And I would think that our intention is as we coming up with a master plan that doesn't have the intended collaboration throughout its development can get us to a point of where, well, this is a property that there is a great deal of benefit to the community and very legitimate concerns on the part of the military department to get resolved. If we develop the plan as is outlined in this scope of work that seems to be totally focused on the city's need and the community needs, and doesn't particularly address the military department's needs or engage the military department throughout rather than incidentally as a stakeholder, that we will end up with work that we will end up having to at least renegotiate to be able to go and do that. And I would like to get the scope of work of the contract include more specific and ongoing throughout collaboration with the military department as our memorandum of understanding calls for. And if to the extent that would mean that we would need to delay action on this contract until it can be reworded in that way, that would be my preference.
Thank you, Councilmember Rensselaer. Is there anybody here on staff that can speak to this? And because this is obviously a concern that I think I'm going to paraphrase the council member. We go through this whole process and then the guard just says, "Oh, too bad, so sad." So is this $100,000 of venture capital on our part, or what kind of an underlying agreement do we have with the state?
Sure. Well, I can speak to the MOU since I worked with that to get that passed there. And to Councilmember Brandstetter's point, the military department is a collaborative stakeholder throughout this process. In fact, the purpose of the MOU, if we're reading it, is to formally commit the city of Lakewood and the military department to implement a Camp Murray boat launch joint master plan and then collaborate throughout. And to Councilmember Brandstetter's point, yes, the military department is a stakeholder and they are consulted, but I wouldn't necessarily downplay that a little bit just because they are included in perhaps one line as a collaborative stakeholder. Doesn't mean that they would not be collaborating throughout the process. Yeah, because to the point, and if you do look at some of the items, such as in the program development, if we're looking at phase 5, task 1, I mean, one of the items is security. So to confirm security protocols, allowances, and limitations. And if you also to jump back to the MOU, if you will, some of the original visioning items there do include making sure that, the federalized fence perimeter is secured. So that is referenced several times throughout the MOU, and is, referenced in the scope of work for the consultants. Yeah, just to speak on the MOU part and sort of where that plays into things. Yep.
Okay, so both, and thank you for pointing out that line. So are there any other questions for staff? Yeah, absolutely, Councilmember.
My concern is in the contract, the deliverables. And there are a number of deliverables, and they all speak into developing the site and for recreational purposes, being able to go and do that. And I don't see in calls for developing two concepts, but there isn't anything in the deliverables that calls for evaluating the particular items in the MOU of terms of evaluating the security impacts and limitations that are on there and defining it. And it certainly doesn't seem to give the military department a greater role in developing the master plan than other lesser stakeholders with which we don't have an MOU. So I guess I'd like to know which deliverables specifically implement the idea that we will pay attention to the security concerns of Camp Murray in developing the master plan, and that we'll have that ongoing collaboration throughout the process as the MOU calls for. I understand it's our money. And I understand we are supposed to take the lead, but I think we should be true to the intent in the MOU of how we're working to do that. And I'm wondering which deliverables are interpreted in terms of doing what I'd like to see.
Yes, thank you, Council Member. So Roxette Miles, the Parks, Recreation, and Community Services Director, and so I'm managing this contract and this project. I think specifically, it can point to some of the deliverables that are in there to address your concerns, but if you want it called out more directly, one is within the engagement. The military department is an essential stakeholder to this group, so it does call out the individual interviews and the role that they would play, not just on the steering committee, but as a primary first partner. And so there's an emphasis on the consultants working with those folks who own the land, lease the land, and would jointly have to agree to these terms. I think some of the specifics you're talking about are within the site constraints report. So a number of environmental things are called out. They're looking at what could technically be built there, but the bigger part of the site constraints, or equally a part of it, is what's going to be allowable based on the current use of the lands and the ownership in the military department role. So that site constraint is all done up front, as well as the partnership roles and responsibilities before the two operational models get developed to say these are options for development that actually meet all of those constraints, including the roles and responsibilities of each of the partners. The two options then will have a larger vetting with the steering committee and the public, but their final deliverable beyond the master plans is actually an implementation. So it calls out a lot, what would it cost to do this? Where could those funds come from? But a big part of that is also what are the terms of what it would take for the partners working together to fund this and then to operate, right? The city can't develop that without some form of agreement beyond this MOU that says what it looks like, the other side of that development, or even the authorization to do a development. So that would be coming back as the next step of the terms between the relationship between the city and the military department in order to do what the master plan process recommends as it's adopted in the end.
Well, thank you. My concern still is that developing a master plan, asking the contractor to assist us in doing that, and then taking a look about how can the master plan be made to fit with the security concerns of the military department is, I think that the security concerns being considered by the contractor in the development of the two options for the master plan would be more appropriate to call out to them that they should do that I'm not reading in the draft of the statement of work. And I think it could be without a great deal of wordsmithing, but more than I'm prepared to do or ask you to do tonight, to do that, because while we can agree on some things to do that, what we can hold the contractor to deliver is what's in the contract. And we're not particularly asking him to look at that essential element of bringing this to fruition for the community. And I guess that maybe my question is, how difficult would it be to edit the statement of work to include some consideration of that without escalating the costs of the contract?
So some of those parameters were already in the site constraints. So the editing, if that needs to be explicited, called out in more detail, because that has been part of the conversation, that could be done, and that should not change the value of the contract because it's already an expected deliverable, but we can make it more explicit.
So could such a change be drafted to be considered, for the contract to be considered at our next regular meeting?
If I can jump in for a couple of questions. The draft contract has the incorporation of the MOU within it itself. So that is what the contractor is required to put into place. If you're suggesting that's not sufficient enough, I would be concerned that if we have that discussion here, that requires a change in the contract or in the RFQ language in the contract, we may need to rebid it.
I'm gonna jump in here though first. So because we have new members, it's been a while since we as a group talked about this. So Ms. Miles, and you're new too. So let's just try to all get on the same page here. We have been talking to the state of Washington about there's already a park, or not necessarily a park, but there is a boat launch there, correct? And it's currently under the state of Washington.
Yeah, the land is federally owned,
It's
but
federally owned.
Department of Fish and Wildlife operates it on behalf of them.
And our request, which led to the original memorandum of understanding, was what is the city explaining to the council and to the people here and to people listening? What is our goal as a city? Why did we even go into this memorandum of understanding for something that was already there?
Yeah. Well, my understanding, there was discussion because there is a desire to have, right, a boat launch on that end of American Lake. And that while there's some access, the level of development of it that makes it known and understood and really operational as a public launch, was insufficient, and that led to the conversations. And so the military department agreed to be open to this conversation, to come up with the master plan, as long as they're strong contributors to what the limitations are that protect the security of the base in the process. So it is to develop a master plan that is amenable to all parties and to understand what the costs would be associated with that and how to approach those future improvements. And that includes what legal relationship would be part of making it happen, as well as funding obligations to make it really operate as a boat launch that is open to City of Lakewood residents, even though it will remain on federal property. They have no ability to transfer land.
So it is, and that's important to remember. We're going into this eyes wide open. We would like to make improvements. Ideally, I think as a council, I'll speak to this. Ideally, we would like to make that a much more accessible boat launch for the people of Lakewood, because there's a lot of pressure on our boat launches that we currently have, especially at American Lake Park North. And we would like another boat launch to do that. It also gives us a little bit more water access, because there is actually, but eyes wide open. It's not our property. It's probably never going to be our property. And there are, as expressed by Councilmember Branstetter, security considerations that need to be dealt with that could end up, depending on the state of the world, torpedoing this whole thing. No pun intended. Is that okay? So this master plan, the National Guard, the state of Washington, is aware of what we're doing right now. Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And they've designated individuals to participate.
Oh, they have. Okay, thank you. All right, so we have a motion on the table to approve motion number 2026-21. Is there any other discussion? Councilmember Branstetter.
Mr. Mayor, I would move to delay consideration of motion 2026-21 until our next official meeting, which I believe would be on April 1st, 2026.
Is there a second? There's no second for that motion. So we have the underlying motion on ordinance number 2026-21. All those in favor of authorizing the execution of an agreement, ordinance 2020, or motion number 2026-21, signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
The ayes have it. And the motion number 2026-21 is approved. All right, so on to our regular agenda. Ms. Schumacher.
First, we have ordinance number 847, granting Ziply Fiber Pacific LLC doing business as Ziply Fiber, a non-exclusive franchise for the transmission of telecommunications in, through, over, and under the rights of way of the city of Lakewood.
Thank you, Ms. Schumacher. We are, go ahead, Mr. Vargas, and then we'll.
Sure. Well, good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council members. Looking on page 37 of your packet tonight. You've seen this franchise before. You saw it last week. It is now before you tonight for a vote. I won't read too much into it. I will remind you of the term of this contract, though. It is for an initial 5 years with up to 3 5-year extensions for a total of 20 years. And that is commensurate with other telecommunication franchises that this body has passed over the last 2 years. So this is your standard telecom franchise, and it also has a fiscal impact of a 5% franchise fee as applicable. So with that, I'll conclude.
Thank you, Mr. Vargas. Are there any questions for Mr. Vargas on on the ordinance number 847? Can I get a motion before we discuss it, if there's any discussion?
Second.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded, ordinance number 847. Is there any discussion surrounding this ordinance? Thank you. All those in favor of ordinance number 847 signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. Ordinance number 847 is passed. Ms. Schumacher, ordinance number 848.
Ordinance number 848, granting NFC Northwest LLC a non-exclusive franchise agreement for the transmission of telecommunications in, through, over, and under the rights of way of the city of Lakewood.
Thank you. Mr. Vargas.
Sure. It should look very familiar. Same franchise for a different company that are both related. So again, this has the 5-year term there, initial 5-year term with up to 3 5-year extensions for a total of 20 years. And it also has a 5% franchise fee. So same exact telecom franchise. But yep, I'll conclude there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vargas. All these interesting companies that most of us have never heard of, wanting to put in communications, telecommunications. Is there any questions for Mr. Vargas? Okay, could I get a motion for ordinance number 848?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded, and ordinance number 848 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion surrounding this franchise agreement? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ordinance is passed. Mr. City Manager, thank you, Mr. Vargas. City Manager Russell, any unfinished business?
No, there is not.
Any new business?
No, there is not.
I keep waiting for something in the unfinished business. I think in all the years I've been here, we've never officially brought up any unfinished business. Items for discussion. So we now move into our study session phase here. Update and request for direction regarding the H-Barn restoration project. Ms. Miles, the Parks and Recreation Community Services Director. Come on down and please tell us, and then we'll, they're asking for our opinion, council members. So if you could jump in here, I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
Absolutely. So it's an exciting project to be brought up to speed on. I think you know most of the history on the project. The initiative in the early cost estimates moved from around the 7 million mark to 14 million for the full project all in, with some of that early direction. In November, there was discussion about how to go forward with that full development and look for cost saving initiatives or efforts. So one of the tasks that I took on coming in was working with the consultants on the possibility of prefabricated buildings for the barns. In discussion with the consultants, we know that the cost estimate was looked at rebuilding the barns in very much the same look and texture. A lot of information has been out there in terms of what we would be able to actually utilize from the original historic structures. So there is some siding and elements from the H, if you want to take it that way, and not as much from the spine. But we have to raise and renovate the entire roof structure in the process. So there's quite a bit of rebuilding that needs to happen. Even if we weren't restoring and using some original materials, the cost savings to fully construct, built, design, bottom up is not a huge reduction based on kind of the small elements of historic restoration. So the one element they were asked to really look at is a prefabricated structure. That's one where we have to find one that best fits our needs. It gets built, decommissioned and brought down so it can be shipped here, and then it's able to be put up based on our specifications, but there's less customization opportunities. So with that, the early estimates is at least $500,000, right around 500,000 is what is anticipated to be saved going with a prefabricated option. Until they really can get to the point of seeing what that means in terms of the mechanical and engineering and how it would fit on the site, the consultants can't really give us a full estimate of how much time that might save and the difference of setting up prefab versus the fully developed or built structures. So they do expect some time and material cost savings that might make it a little bit more than $500,000, but wanted to bring that back. That's the ballpark of the estimated savings. We were able to then look at our potential funding sources, because that's a big part for this. And the memo includes for you what we have secured and where we believe the potential sources for closing the gap might be. Not all of those have been pursued or fully identified. There is a shared federal ask that can make a big difference in that gap. So that's one of the decision points here, is that the charge in November was to go forward with a 60% design. To get to 60% design, we can start to get much more concrete cost estimates going, because they're able to really get into all the mechanical, the electrical, the demolition, like all of the elements that it would take in order to do this building. But those are very divergent paths. So if they move to 60% design based on standard build with some restoration, or they move towards 60% design and a prefabricated building, we end up with very different plan sets. And so that's why this is a decision point, in order for them to take this direction and move forward to those 60% designs and give you much more developed cost estimates when we hit the fall. There's something there. That's the basis for information. Of course, there are Partners for Parks folks in the room. There's also some Park Recreation Advisory Board members in the room. They've been doing fundraising. So of course, some of their concern is, what will the look of this be and how much does it change some of the conceptual design if we go towards the prefabricated option?
Thank you very much, Ms. Miles. Any questions for Ms. Miles? Thank you. Deputy Mayor Bell.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. So with the prefab, is there like any sort of LEED certified type of things that would make it qualified to fall under the LEED certified? Environmental, all of that.
Yeah, I don't have specifics on that. I'd have to get information in terms of the LEED environmental, though everything is developed to code and efficiency standards, but I don't know the distinction between the two buildings.
Yeah, no, I've assumed it would be up to code and all those kinds of things. I was just looking for the certification, because I know there's like platinum and gold and silver, different types of certification, which I think would be fabulous for the H Barn. So thank you.
Councilmember Talbot.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And if I may ask Ms. Deputy Mayor's question a different way, because I wasn't clear myself. So the 13.5 to 14 million that's mentioned in the memo, does that amount include consideration of a LEED certified building?
I would have to find out what level of LEED certification was associated with the original, but it's based on a footage in the conceptual planning, so it's not into levels of detail. And if we require it to be built to a higher level of LEED, no matter which design option is chosen, that will come back in the cost factoring. But at this point, the focus was on whether we become ineligible for funding sources if we don't do restoration. And at this point, now again, we haven't found all the funding sources. At this point, we're not made ineligible for these applications that are already in position, as long as we're still able to bring historic elements back in or sustain them on the site, which we're able to do through the silos and through other interpretive elements.
Okay, yes, thank you. I follow now. So like you mentioned, there are two diverging paths to take here. And so with a rebuild and or with a full historic restoration, there are cost estimates associated with both. But at this point, the 13.5 to 14 million mentioned in the memo, does that mean that at this point, both of those paths amount to thereabouts that estimate? Or wouldn't they each have their own ballpark costs and compared side by side together? What is that? What are those numbers?
Yes, so as maybe originally envisioned, that's the 14, and it's actually 14.2 or 0.3. The 13.5 million is with the assumed change to the prefabricated.
Okay, so
The consultant came back with the information that they'd anticipate at minimum a $500,000 savings by going with the prefabricated building. To get the exact cost, you'd have to design both of them to 60%, which is double the cost of the design, which is why we're here. In respect to the lead building, that was never part of the discussion. In fact, the discussion was to save costs. So I am going to, and this is an assumption, I'm going to pretty much assume that this is not a lead incorporated component. If council would like it designed to lead, just give us that direction.
yes, okay, thank you. That's what I wanted. I think that it's important to draw that clarity out on the record, so thank you. And then so regardless of the path we choose, have we developed an operating budget for the program, for the use of the building, regardless of the architectural preference?
A business plan has not been incorporated yet. That was part of our discussion, I believe, back in November. And we had a little bit of discussion related to that because some of it was being talked about, Partners for Parks putting it on and what that was, and basically came back and said that'd be the responsibility of the city. And we also identified that for a lot of these programs that we'd anticipated, they are not going to be revenue generators. It's going to be more of those destination components that would be anything amounting to type of revenue generation. So yes, that is still absent from it. And granted, it's a big component, but it is somewhat separated from there in terms of how much activities are going to be there, are going to require that much more staffing, and what types of activities those are going to be. But I think in general, based upon the most of the ones that have been talked about, those are probably not going to be big revenue generators. It's just going to be dependent upon the amount of staff that may be needed to run those, if any at all.
And then I'm getting a tiny bit ahead here, but just understanding the context of the status of the whole project as a project. Has there been any environmental assessment done to date? Or I guess environmental impact assessment at all yet? Or are you waiting for are you waiting for final design to begin environmental assessment, or will you be wrapping that into the budget that is covered in, will that be an activity of the budget that would cover the 60% design?
Yeah, I'm unaware of any past report addressing environmental. I don't know if you saw anything in
I
documents.
think most of the site assessment and the cultural resource study has been done. So I think in terms of the location and its siting, right, it's already been well established. So the foundational work now as we're moving into the actual development of the building itself. But to your point, the complementary work to make sure we could get site development and those type of things, we would be eligible to move forward with once we hit the 60% design.
And then the last question, and then I'll pass it back, Mr. Mayor, but the last question is in the table in the memo of the secured and of the secured funds and even the potential funds, the city itself doesn't appear to be contributing any funding from our general fund other than through the LTAC, but the LTAC funds, those are tax revenues collected. Right? And so to that end, is that because this project where does this project rank in prioritization wise in the city's CIP?
So this was a project that is being moved forward, and in terms of the priorities, I think that's a question more for the governing body to identify. And if you want to put it forth any funding from the general fund, these have been laid out previously, and this is the source of funds that have been identified up to this point.
Yeah, thank you. I asked that question because I do kind of worry a little bit that it going for grant funds, you typically have to contribute a local match. And so I guess I was just kind of, I'm kind of trying to make sense of if a local match is required for any of the potential sources that are listed in the memo, do we have adequate general funds to make that local match?
I guess that'd be dependent upon the program. I don't know why you wouldn't be able to use LTAC funds as a match.
They're eligible as well as our partner for parks normally. So it's just really outside of the body that's providing the grant. They look for, in some cases, 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 from other sources. Doesn't have to be general fund.
Thank you. Those are my questions, and I will potentially weigh in into discussion.
Thank you. Any other questions for our Parks Director, Ms.? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Pearson. Yeah,
thank
you.
Mr. City Manager touched on it briefly back in November, we were talking about, or I guess I had brought up the question about really kind of establishing a business plan that would help drive what the 60%, 90% design is going to look like. And if there's anything that is needed, if how we're going to market this, if we're going to market it at all, or if it's just going to be, operating city functions out of it. I guess that's still kind of a key point for me, is that I'd like to really have a good understanding of what the need is for the building, to make sure that we're getting the right building for what the need is, rather than let's get a building and then let's do a plan to use the building. Let's make a plan and then make sure that, we can plan for the building appropriately. So that's still on the top for me. Thank you.
Councilmember Brandstetter.
I have really two questions. One is, I'm having trouble visualizing prefabricated being something that looks essentially like the original structure. And I understand that restoration is not possible to do complete, but when someone talks to me about prefabricated, our most recent experience with a prefabricated building is the temporary library, which I have trouble translating that kind of prefabrication into something that meets the vision of this project, to be able to go and do that. So do we have some experience with eyes on of someone that has done a restoration saving of a historical property, a barn or something of the age of what we're talking about, but using a prefabricated concept?
I'm familiar with other prefabricated buildings that have come in, not one in this historic context. So we have had some research by the consultant team, and it really is about the degree of modulars that are out there to fit the size and scale that has been developed. So it doesn't offer as much customization. And there may be questions about life cycle duration, but they'd be able to bring that back in terms of comparison. So both of them are your 30+ years of minimum initial life cycle. And the question of what you reinvest on top of that comes based on the rest of the construction decisions.
And then the other thing that is in the memo that I think is concerning to me is there is a statement that if we were to go to a prefabricated assumption, and that's the word that's here, that our requirement is that there would be a requirement to put back 1% of the original materials into the building. And that seems terribly minimal. And I understand we can always exceed requirements, but I wouldn't want to move forward with an assumption that the design people would be saying, well, the requirement is 1% of something original that would be there. And quite frankly, I would think we'd probably meet that with the silo, but that's something that's there. So is that 1%, what's the origin of that 1% number? It says if we need to respond to requirements, but 1% back into the project to honor the history of the facility.
Yes. If we remove the barns, because it is in a historic district, then we will have to enter into a memorandum of understanding, and it will be managed by the Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation of the state. And the way it manages then is that they will give us an MOU and they'll negotiate this minimum of what we have to do. And that will be based on 1% over the overall project cost. So as you've pointed out, there's the silos, there's other elements already planned on site. So that makes it very possible to hit or exceed that 1%, but we still would have an MOU that would then govern it, which if we don't demolish and take them away, then we are not going to be under an obligation via the Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation. We would be able to really set those parameters independently.
So the 1% relates to investing 1% of project cost in maintaining some things. It's not 1% of the wood or something.
No, it's not a ratio like of what we
No.
keep. The assumption is it's gone away. So then how would we make sure that the story's told, that, the barn door that is in good shape is then reused, that the silos are intact? Like, it would be showing back how, even if those buildings are gone, the history of the site and how it fits into the historic district is being preserved. And then that would be an obligation.
Okay, and I guess the statement that there is a Fort Steilacoom Historic District that includes this area as opposed to just the area across the street where the fort was. I honestly, I had not heard of that before. I had heard that there were things about, do we want the state to designate it as a historic district? Do we want to initiate it through our processes and as a city to be able to go and do that? And none of those things ever happened as far as I was aware. So is there really an entity, Fort Steilacoom Historic District, or is that our just description of the locale?
Yes, the historic district is registered, and that does include Western State Hospital. And again, our grounds, which were part of the agricultural history of that. So those boundaries exist, and it is identified in the state registers as a historic district. These individual buildings aren't itemized to be separate on the historic register in any way.
But the
But
footprint.
they are contributing buildings to the district's history.
The footprint is a historic.
Yeah.
I understand. That's all the questions that I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, before we start our council discussion, I want to understand where we're at. You're asking us tonight, we're basically at a fork in the road here. If we say all options are on the table to get to 60% design, we have to spend more money. We could say go with the original plan, which is to renovate the whole thing, or we could go with this plan of the prefab, as we now call it, which we've had previous discussions about, but we didn't call it prefab. It was a rebuild, saving some other elements. Is that what you're looking for here?
Yes, basically, the previous direction was go to 60% design. And then it would analyze these costs. The reality of it is we're going to have to pay those costs for both designs. So what the ideally is to save that money for cost to go into both designs. We just identify where's the guidance going to go. And really what council wanted at that time was to be able to evaluate the costs to see if there were cost saving measures. The architect identified the cost saving measures by here, but to save more money, if we can get direction on which way council would like to go with that, it'll save that money from doing two sets of plans to just the one set.
Okay. So now I think Ms. Miles, thank you very much. Stand by just in case there are additional questions. I'm looking for council member input here on what you just heard. So we've had a number of discussions on this topic. Where's your head at? Councilmember Pearson.
My head is planted firmly on my shoulders. Actually, I guess on my neck, but so I'm not, I still really want a plan of how this is going to be used, because when we look back to November, there was another option that was like $7 million to like renovate the structure that was there, but largely keep some of the structural supports and kind of clean it up, do a flip on it, so to speak. And I don't know if that may or may not be appropriate depending on what we're doing with the structure. And that's a major, that's almost doubling the price of the project if we don't know really what we're trying to do. Are we trying to, have some super nice swanky place where people can have weddings as well as city events and stuff? Well, then, we probably can't do that option. But without having a real plan of attack on are we going to be able to generate any money with it at all? Is it fully, operated by the city and we're really not going to be anticipating, any rentals out of it? I don't have a crystal clear image on where we're at there, I guess. That's my concern. That's where I'm at.
Councilmember Branstetter.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. With regards to the options that we're asked to choose between at this point in time in order to be able to move forward with a 60% design, I am in favor of going forward with a commitment to renovation. And my reasons for that is that I would really like to keep faith with those folks in the community that have already over the past 3 years made a commitment to bring this about. And I have talked to quite a few of them, okay, and of doing all that. And for some, maybe even a majority of the money that was donated, renovation was a important element that they were considering as to why they were supporting it. You know, this is, and you know, and I would like to keep faith with those folks that have gone 4 million miles anyway, okay? Okay, to be able to go and do that. And, you know, the 60% design and the estimates will tell us how long the horizon is before we can do that along with the different fundraising. I think that there is a couple of things that have gone forward. We have been successful in looking at getting some Congresswoman Strickland's office to be behind a federal ask of a significant amount, but I don't know in terms of what we told them we were asking for, whether we used, I don't think we used a prefabrication assumption. I think we used a renovation to a significant extent to be able to go and do that. And my idea of trying to be true to the intent of the people who have been working on this for a period of time and working on it, not just as an idea, but as an actual raising dollars and doing things, is we look through the history of projects that we have gone forward with, that we have had a number of projects that we just headlong moved into when the support in the community was an idea and conceptual, and then it didn't really manifest itself into the resources thing. The last project that I can actually remember that the city said, if you can come up with this, then we'll do the project, was the skate park that currently exists in Kiwanis Park, where we essentially told a group of people, and particularly young people, to be able to do that. That said, if you come up with this one, now it wasn't 4 million, but it was. But when you're talking to skateboarders, you know, a couple 100,000 is a lot of money, and they were invested in doing it and put some effort in, and they got the community to get behind it and to be able to go and do that. We have had other projects where we've gone forward and then we've had to make up the shortfall in what idea people couldn't come up with. But that's not the case here. We were very deliberate to say we're not going to move forward significantly to the point where we are today unless the community came up with that $4 million, and they have. So I'm looking at to go and do that, and I would really not want to not going forward with a restoration concept, at least that is significantly restoration, almost seems like a bait and switch strategy with people that have already donated money thinking one thing and we're thinking another.
Thank you, Councilmember Branstetter. Any other? Councilmember Lindholm.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I entered this in medias res. Conversations have been happening for some time before I joined council. I really appreciate Councilmember Pearson's comments about what is the scope of use, and not just the scope of use, what is the maintenance commitment, what is the vision for this. I also appreciate Councilmember Branstetter's thoughts on making sure we're a good partner. I don't want that to come at the cost of being reckless, but I think it's important. And this, of course, comes at a time when we're talking about very real fiscal cliffs and B&O taxes and asking more of the taxpayer. So I'm cautious about this. I'm nervous that we don't know even now fully what we're getting ourselves into. We know that the consultant's going to take 5-6 more months. We know that this is potentially an inflationary time. Are we going to come back here in a year and find that it's gone up another couple million? These are very real concerns I have.
Thank you, Councilmember Lindholm. Deputy Mayor, would you like to weigh in? Councilmember Talbot just bailed you out. Councilmember Talbot.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, I also do appreciate, and I do agree with Councilmember Pearson in to the extent that before I joined council, even the discussions that I heard, I felt like there was, I felt like the plan that was being kind of put out to the community at events and weighed in, the blueprint, if you will, the site plan was very different from, I think, the objectives that this council was still having discussions about the vision and the use and the program for the building. What I saw on the site plan last summer was a very, what I would say, developed site with a lot of interior classroom space and usage space for things like weddings, hall gatherings. This council even talked about how do we ensure that there's proper Wi-Fi and all of that, necessitating architectural demands on the building. And of course, even like, kitchen use, if you're going to have weddings there, you need proper amenities to host those things. And at the same time, a lot of discussions were coming off the heels from Summerfest, where we had a really successful Summerfest, and there was, I think, even desire and vision from the chamber to see that the H Barns could be a regional attractor or some sort of semi-regional attractor, understandably so. But at the same time, I guess what I have not heard been yet discussed is like, I don't think we still know what's planned for the other two barns, right? Like, I don't think there's at least I haven't heard of a plan for the other two barns and how those spatially fit with the uses that would go into the building. And also, if there is the desire to have a kind of more attractor or a barn space that is constantly hosting people for whatever uses, I haven't heard either of a very good master plan for Fort Steilacoom that also handles the traffic and the demand, alcohol in the park for weddings at night, lighting in the park for weddings at night, access to a venue that would host evening events. I haven't heard any kind of master plan or discussion that gets to that level of detail about handling impacts to the site. So for me, the issue has always been, does there really need to be, can the site be used in such a way that if people want to have weddings there, fine, but can it be used in such a way that preserves the historic nature of it and historic architecture, but maybe utilizes outdoor classroom space making and kind of, I guess, bare bones, but pared down architecture to host educational space that is less dependent on heavily constructed indoor space. In other words, like, for example, I think of the hangar at Magnuson Park, which is a kind of a old historic shell. It hosts indoor things, but it's also pretty bare bones structure. So I think that Councilmember Branstetter is right as well, that that the way in which we are a partner to the community and the folks that have invested already donations, expecting a historic, structure to come to, I think that that's important. So, but all in all, I think that the site as it is, I think it's really important to get the usage and the business plan right. And for me, it's less of a space that needs to facilitate so many things inside. And if it can be more, I guess, primitive to say the least, but with some reconstruction, then I think that that's a more pragmatic approach, because you can always add more in the future as the demand necessitates it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Talbot. Deputy Mayor Bell.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. So what I'm hearing, I think, is that we need to have a little bit more of defined vision of what is for the H-Barn, which I think we've asked from council a few times, of knowing what is going to be there. Is it going to be more than just I can have my birthday party or my wedding there type of thing? And those are great suggestions of things that could possibly be there. Thank you, Councilmember Talbot. So I do feel like we definitely need structure, not even a little bit. We need to know, what is the vision for this? What will it be used for? And I know that's a little bit deeper, and I also think that Councilmember Branstetter is correct too. People are expecting to see historic restoration on the H-Barns. We call them the H-Barns. We're restoring them, the silos. I think that if you went with a prefabricated building, it would be very bait and switch. So I agree with you on that. I would prefer to see the historic restoration of the buildings. But at the same time, I don't want to stop any progress. We just received a very substantial grant for this project from our representatives, and which is very appreciative. And I do think that things need to keep moving. And so that does concern me, that we have a great grant that we just got, and we need to get some vision behind everything. So I would like to, wondered if maybe we could put a timeline on it when we could get that back, so we don't stall the project and things can keep moving and we could make some decisions.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bell. So when we talked about this last time, I thought we had some kind of agreement that a rebuild of the current or complete renovation would not work, that the cost would be just incredibly high and it wouldn't ever meet any standards at all. And the earliest things we had were 14 million. I didn't realize that a prefab, which that's a new word, would be 13.5 million. I think we were talking about a lower figure, so I'm not exactly sure what's going on there. But I don't know that a renovation is completely realistic, and that's me, because I thought we had agreed on that before. I will tell you a business plan. I thought we've discussed some of the uses for it. Highly unlikely that this thing will ever make money. The stage, we had some kind of business plan. We looked at it once. It's never made any money. This will become an amenity. The long-term future of the barns is that they will end up like the other barns. They will just eventually fall down. That's, they'll run right behind it. It just fell down. That's the future of the barns. So we have asked for this money. We need to go forward with something, in my mind. If the costs get out of control, we just can't do it, right? But we need something before we go back to DC and ask for $3.2 million. We've already had some initial discussions with the Congresswoman. So I want to be, we need some more information about how this would be used. I would also note that the former mayor who sat on the LTAC committee with the guy from Travel Tacoma, and his name escapes me, and we just talked, and he said this would be a really valuable asset. So the question really isn't, is the city of Lakewood going to make all sorts of money? But there are these other concerns, right? That this is going to cost us money, and it's going to cost us money to keep this thing running long term. So there's, you know, there are, I think we need some kind of business plan. Now that the gap between renovation and prefab has narrowed considerably, I think we need to, I don't think we're ready to go forward clearly with the 60% design, because I think we need to understand those two concepts a little bit more. What it tells me is that probably a renovation is going to cost even more than that, and that's just not going to work. It's just not going to work, I don't think. Councilmember Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I would generally agree. And looking at the two figures, you know, 13.5 and 14, that's like really not even a question on which option, you know, versus a prefab versus a, you know, full restoration of the structure like that. Those are both, I mean, you're talking not that few percentage, you know, points on the overall cost of the project. But I really, if those are the only options, is, you know, 13.5 and 14, those are kind of the same options to me, because we're both providing a ton of funding is really kind of what it comes down to. So I'd like to have an alternative option, and I think that a reasonable, a viable alternative option would be something like Councilmember Talbot had indicated, of keeping it as more of like a passive, you know, recreation shelter thing, where it's maybe more opened up to, you know, people can come in and walk around the lake there and have a place that they can walk into and get shelter and, you know, take a break for a little while it's raining in the wintertime or something, and have somewhere to, you know, go sit and picnic or whatever. But that would be a very realistic option, I think, that you could accomplish a lot of the restoration that we want to do, but not have to do all of the HVAC stuff and all of the, you know, the kitchen and all. If we're not going to be using it in that way, and we don't plan on making money with it at all anyway, then let's make it something that, you know, fits for the community and people will, you know, can easily use without having to rent it out and, you know, try to, otherwise they'll just sit there empty like the pavilion does, except for in the summertime when we're doing concerts, right? I mean, it has a handful of city events and the rest of the time it just sits there. And so I don't want something to just sit there. I want, you know, people, we have a lot of people that walk through the park on a daily basis, rain or shine. And probably the prized possession of the park is the paved loop around the lake. There's hundreds of people that do that every single day. And there really isn't a good shelter, you know, around there. There's a couple of little shelters, but, you know, one family fills it up, right? I mean, so I think that'd be a great viable alternative, is something that's a bit more of a passive space that folks could get shelter in, and we could really do something nice for the H barn there. So that would be without having a business plan or anything, you know, I would be, you know, all for going forward with something similar to that, or at least having that as an option. So thanks.
Councilmember Talbot.
Thank you. Yeah, I think also this is the type of conversation that really benefits from, I think, staff and the city manager and even us, however many that wants to be, but really having some good, strong examples and visuals of architectural types. So like, for example, I think of like, if you've ever been to the Olympia Farmers Market, it's a building that doesn't have heating, but you can put heating elements inside it, shut down garages, but it's covered and it hosts space, it hosts vendors, there's bathrooms, functional bathrooms, et cetera, et cetera. But I guess I'm getting at, I think this is a good time to maybe try to, if and how, when time allows, that if there's, it wouldn't hurt to like maybe tour ourselves, or whether it's in person or just in a PowerPoint, of just having some examples of those different passive types, and versus like, the full caboodle. So I'd just like to put that out there.
Thank you, Councilmember Talbot. So, well, I think we need, I think we can only give staff like about 30 days and whatever members want to be involved here to come up with a plan that works, right, to them. I mean, it's time to fish or cut bait on this thing. I think just limping it along and coming up with more plans and whatnot. Are we going to renovate? Are we going to do prefab? So we can't answer that question tonight. Now we've got a fourth option, because this other option is out there that we talked about, the $7 million option that's no longer on the table, I guess, that we didn't discuss tonight. Then now there's this fourth option of very passive, but we still got to do a lot of work on it. How many millions will that be? There'll be no income. And then, but you'll have to have people there during the day, because you could have all sorts of issues if you have a building that's open, but no lock, nobody supervising. City manager?
Yeah, so just to kind of go back to the last meeting that we had on it, a lot of the same discussion in terms of trying to maximize utility of the function. And I think it's exactly what Councilman Pearson and Talbot have alluded to, and this usable space within it. In terms of the two options tonight, basically is looking to see if you want to go with a prefabricated option to get to that 60% design. Not hearing a whole lot of support for that. I think the other option was not a fundamental historical restoration, but a rebuild incorporating more of it than would be with the prefabricated building. So in terms of what we're looking at tonight, it's really just kind of going back to that decision that was made last fall of moving forward with the 60% design, trying to get the maximum utility out and maintaining the essence of the structure, and not the literal essence, just the overall feel component that it is going to be still the H barn. So that's kind of where we were at last fall when we went and moved forward. So we're still can be on that same trajectory as we get to that 60% design. If we want to establish a ad hoc committee, council can appoint one or two people. They can meet with Partners for Parks, staff as it relates to it, and have those meetings and go forward. But in terms of the direction we had back in the fall, we can still go in that to get to that 60% to bring that back. And that may make some of those decisions as it relates to, well, do we put a kitchen in there? You have those options of, adds or deletes from that same component. So I guess the question is, are we ready to move forward to where we were at with decision last fall to go to that 60% design to maximize utility of the building with that general essence? Wouldn't be a full restoration in the true sense of the word, but more of definitely a restoration than a prefabricated building. That's just what the architect needed to know to be able to keep moving forward. So I guess we can kind of still go along that track with the 60% design under that framework. And yeah, if we want to establish an ad hoc committee that, has Partners for Parks and the architect and staff and a couple members of council, we can certainly do that.
Okay,
So-
thank you for that, Mr. City Manager. I appreciate that clarification. I do think we need to have at least some members of the council meet with Partners for Parks and the Parks people and hash out what they want to see. And so who wants to be on the ad hoc committee? Councilmember Talbot, Councilmember, you need to be on it because you've been talking about it the whole time. So Pearson, Talbot, and Brandstetter. Okay, thanks. I appreciate your volunteering. So you guys set up the meetings and try to hash out a design. No, it's just a concept that you think that the rest of us will agree on because there's 4 more of us that may balk at this. Okay? I mean, we're trusting you 3 to really bring this home. Huh? The usage is a big one too. Yeah. And with that, I think we need to bring in, just to at least let him travel Tacoma guy, let him, why can't I remember his name? Huh?
Dean Berg.
Dean Berg. Everyone knows his name except me. Okay, Dean Berg. So that he can at least throw in his 2 cents. He doesn't have to be at the entire meeting. He just needs to be able to throw his 2 cents.
So, Mr. Mayor, just so that I understand your guidance, that are we at the point of where this evening we are not giving the city manager a direction based on one of the 2 options or even a 3rd option to use to go forward with a 60% design, but that we're going to have some other discussions and visioning before we give 60% design guidance?
That's what I'm saying. I think before we say go to 60%, which I'm fine with saying tonight, go to 60%. But I think the will of the council is before we go off on this, go to 60%, we need to give people some direction as to what that 60%, what direction it needs to go in, because I'm hearing 3 or 4 things. Now, I'm not a good architectural concept guy. I'll be the first to admit that. But so I'm kind of like, what is it going to look like? Is it passive? Is it the full Monty that I think other folks have talked about? I think Partners for Parks has said they're flexible as to what the facility, I mean, I don't think they're wed. They can speak for themselves, but I don't think they're wed to the renovation idea of every board has to be put back where it's supposed to go, which I just don't know is going to work. I think they told us last time that they were okay with some changes to the plan. So the question is, what is this thing going to look like? Where are we aiming to, and where can we get some consensus now? None of us should be surprised that this happened. We have 2 new council members. This has also gone on now for several years, right? And so there's been changes within the council and changes in economic circumstances and various things like that. So I think we do need to decide before we start going out and asking the legislature for any more money. I mean, we're already hanging out there on the gangplank on that. And before, we go talk to the Congresswoman, we need something to hang our hat on, or we need to change what we're asking for back there. That's all I'm saying, right? I'm not going to go back and ask for something that we don't even have a consensus on. So if we're sitting here 2 months from now, or a month and a half from now, kind of 7 people going in 7 different directions, we are not going to ask the Congresswoman for any money for this thing. And then we really need to go toe to toe and decide whether or not we want to go with this concept at all. Okay, so got it. This is real world, but I just understand that there's time constraints. So I think your meetings will be very productive because I but I think we agree that we need a concept, we need some kind of business plan, and what this thing is going to look like and what's agreeable to Partners for Parks. They're out raising money, they're talking to people. We have an upper end. I mean, this thing can't be unlimited. It can't be a $20 million project. That's just not going to work. I don't think that's my opinion, but for this city. So, and we've got other things that we're working on too, that are out there. So anyway, are we on the same page? So I got three eager volunteers for the ad hoc committee that will include Ms. Miles, Partners for Parks, at least 2 people from Partners for Parks. I don't know what other city staff wants to be there. If you want someone from
Our
finance.
director is a member of the city staff, so we'll have Parks Department working with it. More than likely, we'll have additional people sitting on that.
Okay.
Probably reach out to the Parks and Recreation Board as well, and to the Parks Advisory Board just for additional input. So we'll get something put together, and they will be posted open public meetings.
Oh, it will, yeah, because you have 3. Yeah. Okay.
So we'll start moving forward. I think that's the key component, is keep moving forward through the process and taking those next steps.
It is a big project for us. I mean, dollar-wise, I think outside of the city hall and the police station, cost-wise, this will be the largest project we've ever taken on, I think. Outside of road stuff. Well, it'd be more than the road stuff. So we'll figure it out.
Yeah, we're working, trying to get a meeting set up here rather quickly.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions about? So the council members Talbot, Brandstetter, and Pearson, please try to be as flexible as possible for these meetings. And if you need us to cover you on any community meetings, Councilmember Deputy Mayor Bell will be more than happy to cover you on all those items. We'll cover you. And we have also got Councilmember Laura Sella. So he's not here. Yeah, and he's not here, and so he'll volunteer. Anyway. All right, any other questions? Thank you very much for your input. I think we made progress, and we will move forward. Okay. Mr. Gum. Review of the fiscal year 2026 annual action plan for community development block grants, CDBG and home programs. Thank you, Mr. Gum. And this is just an update, correct? Or is this the new process?
It is. This is it's a review of the 2026 annual action plan moving forward. It's to be adopted by HUD, or sorry, we're propose it to HUD May 15th, and then it's adopted and moving forward with our expenditures following July 1st. So this is the point where the meeting switches to red tape. I am the king of red tape, as the former mayor has christened me. So the 2026 annual action plan, kind of what is it? It's a plan that's required by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. It is a framework for how the city will use its CDBG and home funds, what the goals and objectives are for a 1-year period, kind of to paint with some broad strokes and kind of bring you back. So what is home? Home was created in 1990 under the National Housing Affordability Act. It is a United States Department of Housing and Urban Development program. The primary goal of the home program is to provide safe, decent, affordable housing for low and moderate income individuals. So under the home program, there's a number of activities that can be accomplished, but all of them have to result in the creation of affordable housing. One of the projects that we funded recently, as some of you probably seen, it was LASA with their development of 26 affordable housing units, which is kind of moving right along and should be completed sometime this summer. What is CDBG? CDBG was created in 1974 under Title I of the Housing and Community Development Act. Again, it's a United States Housing and Urban Development Program. CDBG has 3 goals: to provide decent housing, provide a suitable living environment, and to expand economic opportunities. All of those, again, are benefiting low and moderate income individuals. The activities that are provided under CDBG are quite a bit more broad than they are under home. Whereas home is just housing, CDBG allows us to develop affordable housing. It allows the cities to do public services activities, public facilities and infrastructure, as well as economic development. So there's a number of activities that are eligible in the agenda packet on page 74. The CDBG funding does come with a number of requirements, as does home. Some of the kind of the key things for CDBG is 20% of the funds cannot be, only 20% of the funds can be expended for program administration. So there's an administration cap. There's a public services cap of 15% of the funding plus the preceding year's program income. And as I mentioned before, the funds have to be used to benefit low and moderate income individuals. And finally, the funds in the CDBG account that the city receives can never exceed 1.5 times the current year's allocation. So they continually have to be moved and expended. Otherwise, they're recaptured by the federal government. So it's important that these programs move funding. Home has a similar program requirement, but it's a little bit longer. It's typically a home program gives you 2 years to commit your funds and then expend them within 4. So the planning process, there's a fairly extensive process that is required by HUD. The initial process requires the cities that receive CDBG and home funds to develop a 5-year plan. So the 5-year plan is kind of a larger umbrella plan, and it defines where the city's going with its expenditures over a 5-year period, what the goals and objectives are and what the outcomes are. The city recently developed that last year. So our 5-year plan was developed in 2025 and approved by council. And it runs through 2029. The annual action plan is done each and every year of the 5-year plan. So it kind of drills down a little deeper and shows what we're doing this year, how we're going to serve low and moderate income individuals. Are we doing housing? Are we doing economic development? What our goals are and what our outcomes are. And then there's a fairly extensive process, and it's involved in both of those plans with public hearings, citizen participation, advisory boards are involved, city council, and the general public. So as I mentioned, the CDBG and home funding are something the city's been receiving since the year 2000. The city became an entitlement city in 2000, which basically means CDBG funds come directly to the city. Before that, we were receiving our funds through the county, through CDBG. The city also qualifies for home funds as part of a home consortium. So we're in a home consortium with the city of Tacoma. The reason being is the home allocation that Lakewood would have received when we originally applied was under $500,000. And in order to be a direct entitlement jurisdiction, you have to have $500,000 in a CDBG, in a home allocation year, where the federal government allocates $1.5 billion. The year that we applied, 2000, we were below that threshold. So we applied through the city of Tacoma through a consortium. So all of our home funds come through the city of Tacoma and an organization that's called Tacoma Community Redevelopment Authority. They're the lead for the home funds. So each and every year we partner with the city of Tacoma. Our annual action plans and 5-year plans and so forth are coordinated and submitted at the same time. So some of the activities in your agenda packet over our 5-year plan that were identified are on page 76. The 5-year plan identified 4 priorities. 1 was to prevent and reduce homelessness and housing instability. 2 was to support diverse rental and homeowner opportunities. 3 was to support public infrastructure improvements, and 4 was to stabilize existing residents and neighborhoods. Those goals are kind of broad. They sound broad. They're supposed to be broad. They allow us to kind of do a lot of different things under those objectives. So they were designed specifically to allow the city to do a number of things. Over the years, again, on page 77 of your agenda packet, you can kind of see what the city has done since 2000 with our CDBG expenditures. So Over that timeframe, the city spent about $7.8 million on housing, $4.8 million on infrastructure, just over $1 million in public services. Economic development has not been a priority activity over the years. We spent a small amount, $45,000, and $3 million in administration in that same time period. As you guys are aware, the congressional budgeting has been a little iffy lately. They did approve the resolution about 3 months ago as part of the budget to fund CDBG and home at primarily the same levels they were funded last year. So I don't anticipate really an increase or a decrease. In 2026, we're anticipating that the city will receive about $480,000. That's about, I don't know, $2,320 less than last year. It may be a little bit less than that, depending on how many cities become new entitlement jurisdictions from this year versus last year. And typically the program adds between 20 to 30 per state. I mean, it does increase every year. So the funding typically is dispersed a little further. Home funding, we anticipate the exact same allocation as last year, $250,503. Staff does administer the CDBG program internally. We have 2 staff members. And then again, through home funding is administered through Tacoma Community Redevelopment Authority and City of Lakewood staff. On page 78, we begin with kind of the funding priority recommendations that we're looking to expend in 2026. And again, this runs July 1st of 2026 through June 30th of 2027. So based on the 5-year goals, the city was looking to fund major home repair in the amount of $412,719.83. That would serve 7 households. That is a program that is administered internally. So myself and 1 other staff member do the housing rehab program, in essence, what it is, major home repair. It's also partnered with 1406 funds that we receive from the state. So we're able to do a large number of housing rehab programs and do rehab for what are elderly and low income homeowners in the city of Lakewood. It's been a very successful program over the years, and we're looking to continue that into 2026. Another funding stream would be emergency assistance for displaced residents under the housing category. Funding would be proposed at $25,000. That would help 30 individuals. That is another program that the city has monitored or maintained and run for the last 7 or 8 years. It's a program that we use when the city is introduced to a building that's dangerous or a nuisance or some other development is happening and people are displaced. So we're able to use those funds to help the low-income individuals that are being displaced relocate rather than making them homeless. Another funding program would be under the services category. CDBG Emergency Payments Program proposed would be $10,000, and that would assist 16 individuals. This is a program that we've run for about 4 years now. In previous years, we've had larger allocations to that fund. We still have some funding left over, so I wasn't proposing a large amount in that fund. There's about $70,000 left from previous year's funding, so this would bring us back to what we have typically allocated. Some of the demand for that program has kind of waned a little bit. It's not necessarily a program that's not prescribed to, but we haven't had as many building closures and as many dangerous activities and so forth in the last couple of years that we've had previously. So with whether that continues, it's something to be seen. The other funding that would be recommended would be CDBG Administration of Home Housing Services in the amount of $12,000. The reason for that allocation is with our home funds, the administration funding that we receive as part of the home funds go to the city of Tacoma. So in order to maintain our home program and do reporting through the computer-based system and so forth, that would fund myself and 1 of our staff members to do that on our end. So there's some administration for the home program that's required, and CDBG does allow for cities to fund that as part of the administration. Some of the funding revenue that's coming in would be a $100,000 anticipated program income for CDBG. That's typical for an annual year between $75,000 and $120,000 is what we have seen. So we always tend to ballpark kind of in the middle, about $100,000 in program revenue. And those come in for the major home repair program. So those funds are revolving loan funds. They're to be used for additional major home repair programs, rehabs as those funds come back. And then there's some reprogram funds that we're looking at reallocating. Fiscal year 2023, Rebuilding Together South Sound. There's $75,000 reprogramming, and fiscal year 2024 administration, about $719.83. Both of those would be reprogrammed as part of the annual action plan. And then the final thing would be to amend the 2025 annual action plan to move $10,000 from CDBG Emergency Payments Program to the CDBG Emergency Assistance for Displaced Program. And that is basically just to kind of allow city staff to spend some funds that we have a need for right now. The 2025 funds in emergency assistance for displacement were all expended in a fairly short order. We did have a building closure that we used for 12 residents. So those funds went faster than we anticipated. And we do have some other expenditures that we're looking for some resources to find to help some individuals that we're looking to relocate now. So we would be proposing to move those funds. That does leave approximately $30,000 still in the fund that we're moving from the Emergency Assistance Displaced Program. So there'd still be funding to be used. It's just kind of shifting so we can do a few different things. Home funding recommendations on page 79 of your packet. The typical allocation that the city does is we put our funding into what's called an affordable housing fund for home. And that is just managed by Tacoma. And then we save those funds typically for 2 to 3 years somewhere to build up a reasonable amount of funding so we can actually fund a fairly large scale project. So the LASA project, where we're able to fund $1 million for the construction. It's kind of hard to fund housing development with $250,000. So typically those are sat on for a number of years, and then they're partnered with Pierce County, or they're partnered with the state or federal funds, and we use a larger scale project. Some of the things that we've done with home funds over the year is building 41 houses in the Tillicum neighborhood. So we've done that through Habitat for Humanity, and they're looking in the future to find other neighborhoods to build in, whether it be Tillicum or somewhere else in Lakewood. So the Affordable Housing Fund would allow us to set the funds aside, and then whomever is developing affordable housing comes in and applies to us. And that comes to the council and TCRA for approval. And then some of the milestones that we have kind of accomplished and where we're going. So in February 24th, 2026, the city did conduct its first public hearing on CDBG uses of funds. There was a number of people that attended that. Primarily, the comments were affordable housing related, some down payment assistance, some move-in costs, and then elderly and veteran assistance programs. So a lot of it was housing related. And then there was an individual that was requesting potential funding for the Tillicum Community Center. They're looking to do some renovations and have applied for a state grant of between $200,000 and $400,000. And they needed funding to do their two things. They needed to do a building survey to find out what needed to be done on the building and the costs, as well as an audit. So they were going to request $10,000 potential for the financial audit. That hasn't, they haven't actually submitted an application. So my thought would be, were council to want to do that, that would be something we could use our admin funds for as well. So we wouldn't have to necessarily be built into the plan. It can be paid for. It does make it a little easier if we use admin funds versus providing services, because admin doesn't require the service level and the reporting and all the requirements. And that's kind of would be a large ask for the Tillicum Community Center for a $10,000 funding source, especially when they're just looking to do an audit. So moving forward, we're looking to recommend those funding sources through CDBG and home through council. This does come back to council on April 20th for a public hearing. Before that, there's a 30-day public comment period that runs April 1st to April 30th. We are taking this presentation to the Planning Commission on March 18th, which is Wednesday. It's to go before CSAB on Thursday. I will bring those results back to council as what their recommendations are. And then it moves forward for approval by City Council on May 4th and submittal to HUD on May 15th. The only other note that I have in the agenda packet was that city staff has been in contact with the Public Works Department. As part of the 5-year plan, there were some roads that were identified for construction, and CDBG funding was one of the revenue streams that we were looking to fund those with. That is still in the plan. Public Works mentioned this is one of their busiest years they've ever had for roads, and next year's going to be busier. So 2028 and 2029 are the years that they're looking to do road development with CDBG. So they are coming. It's just a little bit more delayed than originally thought. So with that, does council have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Gum, for that presentation. Does council have any questions for Mr. Gum? So you'll see this again, Councilmember Brandstetter. So we do have several other presentations, and we're going to have some major discussions, I think, on the next item. So need these to be fairly short, and we're going to see this again.
Yeah, Mr. Gum, what I really would like to ask you to do is to take a look at the write-up that's on page 90 of our packet, but it says it's under the title of Describe Coordination with the Continuum of Care. We're using the same language that we've used for years. And I don't believe it's accurate that Lakewood is an actively engaged member of the continuum of care at the moment, because slightly over 2 years ago, there were problems internally within the relationships of the continuum of care with some of the jurisdictions, including Lakewood, and the previous city manager directed staff to disengage from participating with the curriculum of care. And the curriculum of care ended up recognizing that they had some problems and did some reorganization of their bylaws and charter. And they came to the council, maybe it's 10 months ago, and asked us if we would rejoin as an active member, being able to go and do that. And because of the ongoing involvement with the program to create a unified approach to homelessness and some actions with SHAPE, we didn't do that. We did not engage and establish a staff member relationship with the continuum of care ongoing. So that's not where we are. And I can say that in the effort relating to the establishing a countywide unified approach to homelessness, the continuum of care has emerged in not a decision, but in a discussion as an impediment to that. And so I don't think that we're should actively say that we're an actively engaged member of that right now. Although, unless the city manager decides that he wants to begin to actively engage with them I'm not sure what purpose right now, because they are a very parochial organization that has control of certain things of money that they don't really want anyone else's input as to what they do with it. and are fairly disrespectful when you ask. But if you could look at that section in terms of if you want to mute it slightly.
Mr. Mayor. This is slightly awkward. So I'm on the continuum of care. I've been on the continuum of care prior to being on city council, and so we can have that conversation.
More to come on that. Councilmember Pearson.
No questions, just more of a comment. And I think that what we do here and what Mr. Gum does here is incredibly valuable for what we do as far as keeping people in housing and, you know, fixing housing and demoing other houses and stuff. The value added and the impact on community is huge. That is all comes from you and your other team of one. So I just really appreciate all the work you do and just wanted to recognize you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great point, given that the amount is lower than when it was 20-something years ago or whatever, and our costs keep going up. Great job on the home stuff. I'll be interested to hear going forward how you're going to do this split between transportation and it sounds like, and we're aware that the Tillicum situation really has stabilized. So that'll be an interesting kind of future discussions. I think we'll leave it at that. I'm gonna want to take about a 10-minute break. We'll come back at how about 8:35? And that'll be 9-minute break, and then we'll start the discussion surrounding the changes to the rental housing licensing program. Is that okay? 8:35. Ready to go here. Thank you very much. So the next item on the agenda tonight, and it begins on page 133 of your packet, is a review of amendments to the Lakewood Municipal Code, Chapter 5.60, related to rental housing licensing. Mr. Gum, the program manager, is here to make brief comments about the changes that he is requesting us to make.
So good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. Again, the proposal before you is to amend Ordinance 644, which is the Chapter 5.60 of Lakewood Municipal Code. Ordinance 644 was initially approved by council on August 1st, 2016, and it did enact LMC 5.60, which is the city's rental housing safety inspection and registration program. So the program's history, kind of give you a little background. After the 2016 adoption, the city put together the plan. There was a number of meetings. We brought the proposals back to council, developed the inspection checklist and the admin policies and so forth, and we started inspections in 2018. So we've inspected kind of a couple of rounds of inspections. All rental properties as part of the program are required to register. There are some exceptions in the code, not a large number of exceptions, but there are some. And as part of the inspection process, a rental property has to register each and every year. And once every 5 years, they have to have what's considered a inspection of their property and gather a passing score to have what's considered what's considered to have a certification that they're in compliance with the program. So typically we have about 2,000 rental properties and about 12,000 rental units that are registered. Since 2018, all of those properties have been inspected on multiple occasions. As we started the process, we were selecting about 20% of the rental properties at random each and every year. And then moving forward, they have established their 5-year inspection cycle. So we've gone through a couple of those phases where we're getting close to going through the second now. What we saw in the first probably 2 or 3 years is kind of different than what we're seeing now from failed inspections. So the first couple of years, staff had seen a number of kind of significant failures, and it was kind of apparent what had been happening over the years. There was some delayed maintenance and non-investment in multifamily properties especially. So we were seeing significant structural damages, decks, literally 3 stories falling off the back of buildings, and multiple apartment complexes, roofs that had leaked for years and years and years, causing structural damage, all kinds of life safety issues, electrical, wiring, plumbing, all kinds of things. Where we're at now is kind of in a little bit of a different place. What we're typically seeing fail in years 8 and 9 is small things like smoke detectors that are missing, GFCIs that are non-functional. It's tends to be small electrical failures, small plumbing failures, a lot of water heater issues where they've got flexible piping that's installed where they're supposed to be smoothbore piping. So it's more kind of minutia level of building code related failures. They're important, but they're not necessarily life threatening. They do affect the structure of a building. They do affect how a building operates and can potentially lead to structural damage, but it's not typically the immediate life safety issues. So one of the reasons that we were looking to propose the changes to LMC 5.60 was, one, to kind of recognize some of those changes, and 2, the initial legislation or the initial Lake Municipal Code was written, kind of combined 2 things, licensing, and it combined inspection. So some of those issues, when they were put together, didn't really make sense. The program was intended to comply with RCW 125. And again, when we combined the inspection and the licensing and provided exemptions for some of the properties, we provided exemptions from the entire code. not necessarily just from licensing or from the inspection, but from the entire code. For example, newly constructed apartments were exempted from the entire code for the first 10 years. So they did not have to register. They didn't need to obtain a rental business license, and they weren't to be inspected. The original intent of the code was, one, not to have them not obtain a business license, but it was not to be inspected because it was presumed that their new construction would comply with building code and our rental inspections. But nonetheless, the code did exempt them. There was another good example would be properties receiving certain types of housing subsidies were provided exemption. Some of the HUD programs and some of those types provided exemptions. And again, it was from registration and rental, not necessarily just the inspection process. So the proposed draft amendments that we're looking to make would be one, replace some of the language that is in there to kind of clarify. So we were proposing to replace rental housing complex with the term rental housing unit throughout the code section. And that is kind of complying with the registration requirements for all properties, not just rental housing complexes. Under the code, a rental housing complex is defined as 5 or more units. In essence, they would only apply to large scale properties the way it's written, not single family and duplexes and triplexes and so forth. So the intent of the code was to have all rental properties comply, and I think this clarifies that and makes it clearer. The second one would be to correct licensing and registration inspection issues under 5.60.025. That specifically delineates which properties are exempt both from licensing and registration, or those properties that are exempt from just the inspection process. The third one would be to remove program exemption for accessory dwelling units or ADUs, transitional housing and shelters from program registration and inspection requirements. Some of that is relating to the new state legislations on ADU and some of the infill housing that we're anticipating coming to the city of Lakewood. We have a number of ADUs that are being operated as rental properties now. Some of them are registered and we have inspected them. So this would kind of meet the requirements that the state is sending to the city of Lakewood with more traditional housing development, more shelter housing, and more ADUs. The thought there was, I mean, if you're developing housing and it's affordable, that it still should be meeting the requirements that other properties are meeting for rental. The inspections process and the requirement to meet minimum housing standards. Number 4 would be proposing to reduce the number of years a property can be exempt. Currently, the requirement is 10 years. Property is exempt from new construction. The proposal would be reduce that to 5 years. The thought being that in past, we've inspected a couple of properties that have come online after 10 years and they had some significant issues that needed to be corrected. One of them was the Echelon apartment complex. So rather than have them go 10 years, 5 years would be the proposal to city staff and have them inspected after that cycle. The 5th proposed change would be to provide for a self-certification option for property owners to certify the properties in compliance with the city's rental housing requirements. And again, as I mentioned, all properties are inspected once every 5 years. So this would be a certification that they would provide once every 5 years. It does come along with a checklist that they're to certify that all of their units meet all of the requirements. We have an inspection program that requires 100% pass. So every item on the checklist has to be inspected and it has to be passed. Anything that fails, in essence, it's a failed inspection. So they would have to certify all of their properties, all of their units on their property and all of their properties meet that requirement. The other cities that currently do this are the city of Seattle and the city of Renton. We would follow a program similar to the city of Renton. They've done this since they started their program, where they have a one-page certification and then they have their checklist that's filled out to ensure that all of the units are passed. The owners of properties still have 3 options, even with the self-certification. So the option where it approved self-certification would be 1. The owners of a property can still choose to have a private inspector inspect their property, or they can choose to have a city of Lakewood inspector inspect their property. So there's still 3 options moving forward. I don't anticipate that all property owners will choose the self-certification. My thought is somewhere in the 75%, 70 to 75% would probably be what they would be looking for self-certification. We still have a number of property owners who appreciate the rental inspection program and like to use it to kind of check up on their managers and make sure that their property is being maintained. So we've heard from a number of property owners and say, hey, we like this because I'm not around and I want to make sure that my property manager is doing a good job, and you guys are doing a good job to let me know when things aren't being followed. So the thought would be that not all of properties would choose certification. And then kind of the big question is, how would that affect staff and inspection? So it's not necessarily going to change the inspection process. It's just going to change kind of how we do it, kind of a semantics change for me in essence. So we would still be looking to follow up with the same number of random inspections on properties that we would be doing right now with the mandated. So like I said, every 5 years, properties on the cycle to be inspected. Not necessarily all of those properties are ones that have large scale failures. A lot of those ones for the past inspection cycles, a couple of them, 2 cycles have had kind of minor failures. So allowing the city to kind of focus on some of the more problem properties or some of the other code reported issues would allow us to kind of shift time away from some of the properties that we've seen doing a really good job over the years and have small failures, to allow us to focus on some of the properties that are a little bit more troublesome for us. So it would free up staff time. The inspection proposal would be the same as it was before. So the city would do 20% of the units that we select randomly in the apartment complexes. Right now, we select 20% of the apartments that are in the 5-year cycle. So it's in essence, you're doing the same inspections. You're just kind of freeing up staff to focus on different properties and in different areas. If we have code enforcement issues, we tend to focus a little more heavily on those properties. We're looking at historical data to see who's complying and what they're failing or what they're not failing on. And as I mentioned before, most of them are kind of small scale. So this would allow us to shift our gears and focus on in a little bit of a different way and redirect where staff is going. Moving forward, the council would be reviewing this again on April 6th. If approved, it would go into effect 30 days later. The last step that I forgot to mention, it was brought before the Lakewood Planning Commission on February 18th. They held a public hearing on March 4th and approved the proposed amendment 7-0. So staff is moving through the process and bringing it to council now to hear your input.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gum. Are there any questions for Mr. Gum? Councilmember Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Gum. I've got a few questions here. First, how do adult family homes fit into rental house? Is it totally separate? Then these aren't rental units because they're just renting out bedrooms and they're not under this program. Is that
correct? They're one of the exemptions. A state licensed facility is exempt from our program.
And is that exempt at the state level or exempted by okay, Heidi's saying yes, okay.
It's exempted by municipal code for sure. Our code provides.
Yeah, our code, but
yeah, the adult family homes are completely regulated by the state. And even if we have permitting that's required for them as businesses, they go to the state and get permitting there. And one of the issues years gone by has been that they can get that state license regardless of whether or not they've gotten a license from us.
Gotcha, thank you. One of the terms that I found a little bit ambiguous was newly constructed, and I didn't see that in the definitions. I just didn't know if is that something's been built in the last 20 years, 5 years. It just said newly constructed with no violations within 5 years. So I just didn't know how new is newly constructed, I guess.
So newly constructed for the terms of the code would be in essence newly constructed. It received its certificate of occupancy. So 5 years from that date. If that's something that we need to add, that's a simple definition to add from the building code, but we could clarify that.
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful with clarification because I was reading it as that it's been newly constructed, but could have been 20 years ago, and it just hasn't had any violations in the last 5 years or something. So, anyway, just minor thing there. And then the self-certification sounds interesting. I certainly appreciate the good apples, right? Like we can kind of let them do their own thing. It frees us up to do other work that's important as well. But how do we know the bad apples if they're just, sending this thing in and it doesn't actually, it's not accurate, it's not truthful that what they're filling. Do we have a way of verifying that at all? Or is it, you only get so many self-certifications before we have to come out and do one of our inspections to kind of verify that how things are going along?
Yeah, so it would be based on some of the historical data that we've seen, as well as complaints that we receive. So we track both of those. When somebody complains and has an issue with habitability, myself and the program coordinator track that in spreadsheets, so we know kind of who's had the most complaints, what they're regarding. We're also looking at failures over the last 2 inspection cycles to kind of see where they're at, especially the most recent inspection cycle, kind of see what they've failed, what they've made improvements on. So some of it is just looking at historical data, and some of it is being able to kind of know who's maintained their property over the years and complaints we've had, code enforcement complaints, police complaints. Believe it or not, we even get property manager complaints. We've had property managers who've said, "Hey, my owner doesn't want me to do this. Will you come out and look at it? Because I need you to they need it fixed. I can't leave people in this condition." So we kind of have that built-in knowledge of who these actors are that we kind of need to follow up with.
Okay.
And the inspection cycle, as I mentioned, I mean, it does free staff up a little bit to follow up with different properties.
Yeah, I certainly appreciate that. And then my final question was about one of the exemptions talks about newly constructed rental units. And then there's a number of exemptions under that receives funding and subsidies from federal or state and local government. So what is that, if you have some sort of a project, a low income project that's got all these funds from, the state or local, then those are exempt from any sort of inspection, rental inspections?
They could be exempt from inspections. The key thing that I would say on that exemption, and something that I've kind of followed with my staff, is it's when you get to, that's on page 140, rental units, and then it's IV, for which the director determines that the inspection is substantially equivalent to the inspection required by this chapter. I haven't found an inspection that's substantially equivalent to ours. I mean, they're just not out there. So with our CDBG programs, and CDBG Home, Section 8, all of those programs have their own inspection protocols, and they don't actually rise to the level that ours do. So even though that they're federally funded, they're still inspected by our program because they don't rise to our level of inspection. So we actually haven't had a single exemption under that since we've started our program.
Is that exemption a state exemption, or is that something that we have? I guess to me, it kind of reads weird as like, if you do low income projects, you're exempt from these inspections. And it's like, I think that quite the contrary, that everyone should be having, safe housing and keeping up on inspections. And so if there's no state mandate to have that exemption in there, I would, propose striking that exemption. And it sounds like most folks go the other route anyway of getting inspections. So that would be my only comment there.
Thank you. Councilmember Lindell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I may be in the minority on this with this council. It's very important that we promote safe housing. I don't love that we charge people who choose to rent out their home. There are a lot of disincentives out there in the market already for folks who are trying to make that pencil and make it work. But be that as it may, one of the distinctions I appreciate in the real estate world is a distinction between 5 and more units and 4 and under. We have different lending products for those. We have different ways of selling those. They have different requirements in all kinds of ways. It makes a lot of sense to me to have a rental, and I know we're not actually putting the rental housing program on trial here, but if we were, I would say something like, I appreciate wanting to make sure that we have safe housing across Lakewood. I appreciate making sure that our larger operators are doing what they should be doing by their tenants. I'm concerned when we start including ADUs in these inspections, and I'll tell you why. ADUs are a different kind of housing product, as you know. This is not a sixplex on a corner of a road. This might be in someone's backyard. They might be renting it to a friend for 3 months or short term. They might be, it's a very personal space. It's on their property. And I do worry about slippery slopes here. For example, there are people who rent out rooms in Lakewood. Are we going to start charging them, making them get a license and start having their single family home that they live in inspected to make sure it's safe, to make sure that that person is housed appropriately in that room? And we're living at a time when tenants are not without a voice. There was a time when tenants were, quite frankly, abused by many landlords in the world. And now we're at a time where they have a voice, they have free legal help, they have someone to call if they need help at no cost to them. So I say all this to say I would be strongly opposed to expanding the rental housing program to ADUs if we were to leave the rest of it intact.
Thank you, Councilmember Lindholm. Councilmember Brandstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Gum. I think the concept of providing for self-certification is good. It'll enable us to focus things more done. I think that the concern about somebody not accurately self-certifying is very likely going to be, if it was a serious violation, be detected by a tenant bringing an issue to the attention of the city, which would trigger an inspection by a city inspector to be able to go and do that. With regard to the exemption section on rental units, I would really like to delete the line that says that receive funding or subsidies from the federal, state, or local government. Okay, I think that if you try to use advantage of people who get some subsidies from the VA for their housing, there's actually a fairly rigorous inspection program that's covered by the second paragraph that are inspected to be able to go and do that, and a person should be able to submit that inspection in terms of having to do that, like it said, and so, you know, just keeping paragraphs, subparagraph I and IV, that is better than, because funding or subsidy is very vague. I mean, what is it that it could be anything, but it's really intended that someone has some kind of a voucher that's paying part of their rent or all of their rent. Okay, and that most of the agencies that provide those vouchers have an inspection requirement. So I think we could be there. I had one transition question regarding the requirement for when you have received your certificate of occupancy and you have been not expecting to have to be subject to the regulation for 10 years, and we're changing it to 5. What are you going to do with the property that is 7 years into their 10 years? Are you going to let them go to 10? I mean, if they're only 3, you're just going to let them run to 5 and that'll go. But you know, what do you do with the person who's past 5 but hasn't reached 10? Are you going to immediately tell them they have to be inspected, or are you going to let them grandfather them in the 10 until they have to do that?
The thought, the thought was to, one, have them register their property immediately because they were exempt from both of those. So they would start registering their properties. And the thought was to move them into the inspection cycle relatively soon, as soon as we could get them in the inspection cycle, being that they're past their 5-year requirement at this point in time. And again, that's going to be based on number of inspections that we've got going. If we're choosing to inspect randomly at this point in time, we'll have to kind of reallocate our load for staff and kind of see where we're at. But the thought was to move them into the inspection cycle relatively soon.
The inspection cycles were determined by lottery?
Correct.
So yeah, are we still doing that? Or would we still be doing that in some way?
What we did is selected 20% of them each and every year for 5 years. So there was an initial lottery, and then that put everybody in kind of a 5-year time cycle. So everybody has already been allocated unless a property comes now that's a new rental. So every once in a while, we do get some new properties come in, and they're inspected in that year in which that they're put into the inspection program. So new ones are inspected now. Everyone else is on their 5-year cycle from this point moving forward.
Yep. And when there's a change in ownership of a property, but that has rental units, does that trigger an inspection or just a relicensing?
It triggers relicensing. The certificate of compliance is transferable with the property owner and can continue until it's expired, but they have to relicense under the new ownership.
And then in the other very unusual circumstance is in where units have become unoccupied, like by a fire, and then a owner or a new owner rehabs the building over a couple of years sometimes. Is that considered new?
Not unless it was all the units. We've had a few buildings where all of the units burned. So you're doing substantial rehabilitation, which is an actual building code construction. So you're going in and you're redoing all of the surfaces, all of the finishes, the plumbing, electrical, you're bringing it up to code. Unless they get to a substantial rehab, then no, it wouldn't qualify for a full inspection. We would just go back and look at the one unit. But if they're doing all of them at a substantial rehab level, then at that point in time, we could consider a 5-year exemption.
So a new certificate of occupancy after all that rehabbing wouldn't trigger a 5-year exemption?
No, not for an individual unit, but for an entire building, it could.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Branstetter. Any other questions from anybody? Okay, just a couple of questions. The last time a unit that I remember, a unit or at a building made it into the paper, so it's public, it's out there in the public, was this building on 115th Street. Right, is it 115th?
Melody Court Apartments.
And we discovered there were people, I don't know the whole story. Under this new plan, would you have found those issues?
Yes, under this plan, we inspected that building for 2 different reasons. Code enforcement was in that building before rental housing was, so we had been getting reports from our code enforcement staff. And then the building department also inspected it with the fire department. So it was referred to us through code enforcement activities, and that would have still happened even under this.
Okay, so Councilmember Branstetter and I were here, and we had to give some blood to get this thing approved. And you guys have done wonderful work, and I know it took a long time to implement because we wanted to do it electronically and not by paper, and so that took a long time. So we're really somewhere in that, we're getting close to 10 years. So a lot of units have been inspected twice. This will free up staff time to do what?
Focus on properties that we know have larger issues than some of the ones that we're required to inspect. Right now, everybody has a 5-year cycle, so we're inspecting everybody on an equal basis. So we're not able to focus on some of the more problem properties because our time is spent on the ones that we have to inspect. There's a lot of properties that the property owners and managers have done a good job and realistically, I mean, I can think of a handful that literally failed for smoke detectors that were missing, and it wasn't smoke detectors that were missing because they were at fault, because tenants had removed them. So, I mean, that happens. So buildings like that, where we know that they're continually maintaining those units, we can go away from those units and then focus on some of the more problem properties that have some of the bigger life safety issues that there's still some out there. It's significantly reduced from what we were seeing originally, but there's a lot of good actors and a lot of good property owners who are doing a lot to meet these requirements. And then there's kind of the average ones, and then there's still a few that are kind of lagging in maintenance. So we focus our time on those ones that are kind of lacking in that maintenance.
Okay. For me, this is a little bit of a leap of faith. I think there were some language changes that you've been asked to make, or I guess I always thought that the receive funding subsidies from federal or state or local government or something like that was in the state law that allowed this in the first place. If you went back to the RCW, didn't it explain what exemptions were in there to the inspection program? I'm just saying that to you. You don't.
I don't remember anything in RCW 5918-125 that
Yeah.
described the exemption process.
Oh,
I'd have to go
okay.
back in and look and
Okay.
give you a
So
specific answer.
we should probably just match it to that
Yeah.
if there was, but it's been years since I looked. So as to Councilmember Lindholm's, that's a material change. So didn't hear it from anybody else. So if he would like to make that change, he can propose a change at an amendment at final, if you'd like. Does that work?
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Wachter, City Attorney, review of resolution updating the city's purchasing policies.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of the council, Heidi Wachter, City Attorney. And this is a matter of bringing our purchasing policies into conformity with state law in two ways. One is that the small works roster at the state level has been repealed. So we're going to take that stuff out of the purchasing policies. And a copy of the proposal is in your packet along with the indicated line items. The second item is bringing in language about the apprenticeship program that is now required to be part of our bidding process. I will tell you that our departments, Planning and Public Works, as well as Parks, are already moving in that direction. This is just to make sure that our policies actually conform with the state law and with what we're doing. And I will tell you, I have one thing on page 162 at the bottom. It is not a Scrivener's error. It is an outright mistake that I'm going to correct. I told you I would be coming back on Monday, March 2nd, which would be hard because that happened 2 weeks ago. I will be coming back on April 20th with this for passage if the council is amenable to that. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them, but really this is just to provide conformity.
Any questions for Ms. Wachter?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wachter. Okay. Reports by the city manager. Mr. Russell.
Yeah, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council, just a few items on the upcoming schedule. Tomorrow night, Custer Neighborhood Association. On Saturday, the 28th and 29th, spring cleanup. On the 28th, there is the invitation out for discussion on homelessness that one of our council members will be facilitating. On April 1st, the mayor's coffee. I'll be talking about the legacy plan. Then moving forward on the retreat is on April 18th. Individual meetings with the facilitator is on March 30th and 31st. And we do not have any formal council meetings for the next 2 Mondays, so we're off for a little bit. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Thank you. And Okay, any questions for the city manager? Okay, council member comments. Councilmember Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No comments tonight.
How's baseball going? Let's forget that. Councilmember Talbot.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. No major comments, I guess, questions or, okay, yeah, I guess some comment tonight on some of the public comments we heard a little bit about, but received in our inbox regarding the Gary Oaks around John Dower. So I believe the last we heard an update from that project was when the agreement to contract for the right-of-way agent came to us back in January, and that's, I think, the first and only time we'd seen the plans. And it was my understanding from that meeting that that there was no tree removal. So this was the first time that I was hearing tonight that there is tree removal. So I would like to get some clarification on um what that is, what that concern is, and
Yeah, we'll get a note out to council about what trees are going to be removed as part of that sidewalk installation project.
thank you. I think that's the only question I had for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Talbot. Councilmember Brandstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be attending the elected leadership group for the Unified Approach to Homelessness meeting that is going to occur on the 20th. But I am looking forward to our retreat on the 18th, okay, where I think we can maybe reduce our big list of things that we're trying to do down to something meaningful and communicate that to the city manager and be able to go and do that. But in that regard, I guess I would just like to inform you and the other council members that I had exchanged some emails with him regarding an item that is in our legislative policy manual for Pierce County. And it was one that said work to establish an agreement with the Pierce County Library District to be able to, during an interim period while there is nothing going on the old library site, to come to an agreement of where the city can green that and make it into some sort of a park as opposed to a scabland. That was something that has been in that manual for 2 years. And it predates the city manager's tenure. So he asked to look to have that reconvened before he begins to reach back out to the library district to do that. And I think our retreat would be a good place for us to at least touch on that to see whether that's something that we're still interested in doing and the value of it.
Thank you, Councilmember Brandstetter, and I think we can speak to that because I think the proponent of there was a major proponent of that position that isn't here any longer. So we'll have that discussion surrounding things. Councilmember Lindholm.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really appreciate a lot of our public comment tonight, from B&O to parks to, of course, our trees, which we hold so dear. I also appreciated hearing about Dennis Haugen's death. You know, we have a lot of folks who take time out of their day. They are unpaid. They come here, they spend their time. And if we were to give away, if there was a hall of fame for public comment, Dennis Haugen would be in it. I did not have the pleasure of serving on council when Dennis made most of his remarks, but I heard them. And then whether one disagrees with his approach or his manner, I appreciate any time someone takes time out of their day and comes down here in the evening around dinner time and tells us what they think. So I'm thankful for that. That's it.
Thank you, Councilmember Lindholm. Deputy Mayor Bell.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to make a comment on the public comment. I really liked the fact that, and this was kind of a 30th anniversary tie-in that Mr. Kaufman brought up. He brought a list of people who he thought, he wanted to recognize they were transition members, and he said that they merit specific recognition, and he put it under the 30th anniversary kind of header. So I know that a lot of things are being planned for the 30th anniversary, but I thought that was really nice of kind of bringing some people forward and letting us know about them. We heard a little history, and it was unexpected, and I found it really enjoyable. So just adding to that. And then I came a little bit early and went to the youth council meeting because I'm the liaison, and my child is in it too. So, and they were doing a panel kind of presentation on beloved community. So they had about 6 community members in the front. The quilt is over there for the beloved community kind of event that they put together. And they were coming up with ideas for next year and just really engaging our youth, engaging the youth council. I thought it was just very, very cool. And so I'm excited to see what will happen with the MLK celebration next year and how they can expand it. And I saw that Ms. Martinez was here also, our quintessential event lady. So she asked about growing it. So I thought that that was also super exciting. So I'm excited for that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bell. Couple of comments on that first one, and I think Councilmember Branstetter knows a lot of the folks that were involved in those initial things. I remember Bill Larkin, actually, because the first board I served on, we had a transportation advisory board, and somewhere around the turn of the century, that seems like a long time ago now. I like to throw that in because it makes me sound seasoned. Somewhere around the turn of the century, I went on the Citizens Transportation Committee, and it was a wonderful committee. It was just really people who were really interested in really moving forward the transportation in our city. And Bill Larkin was the guy who was in charge of that, and he was a wonderful man, and he was very patient, and we just had some really great members, a number of whom have passed on. And so on a lot of those things we have finally gotten to really in the last 10, 15 years. A lot of the projects that we discussed, some of even the smaller projects that we discussed. I remember Bill Larkin talking about sidewalks along Angle Lane going from Hipkins to the park that we just got done 2 or 3 years ago, right? He talked about that, 20 something years ago. So a lot of vision there. So I did appreciate that. And the same with Dennis Haugen. So I'll give you a Dennis Haugen story. I mean, we know him of always bugging us and coming in here with this video player and yelling us about Fargo, North Dakota. He called me at work. He would call me at my office. And a lot of times I couldn't, right? I had people in my office and I was like, I couldn't answer the phone. But once in a while I did, and I talked to him for a little while. But as soon as I said, Dennis, I've got to go into a meeting, or Dennis, I've got somebody in my office, he immediately said, okay, no problem. Boom, he was off. So he was very considerate, actually, for all the things that he would say to us. He was actually a very considerate individual. And I don't ever remember him going beyond the 3 minutes allowed. So I appreciate those comments. I think I'm just going to leave it at that. We're taking on some media issues, right, in a difficult time. So I really do appreciate everyone really digging in and really putting in the work, because I think that anytime, and I'm specifically talking to the 3 people who have now added another committee to their list, I really do appreciate that. And you just don't know how much, because I know there's a lot of things going on. And so we have, yeah, okay. So we've got a number of things on the coffee with the mayor, or whatever we call it now, the quarterly meeting on the 1st of April. So the new mayor, April 1st, really not intended to be a joke, but we're going to talk about parks, the Parks Legacy Plan. So it'll be interesting to see what we're gonna, because they're in the midst of working on that. And then I've got a presentation at Lakewood Rotary on the 3rd, on Friday the 3rd. So anyway, good. I think I've covered everything I need to cover. Thank you very much. Any other comments? Okay. Thank you very much for your good work. Okay, thank you, Mr.
Just a
Clem.
kudos to our city manager for giving a presentation at the chamber here this last week. I learned some things about my city. I saw some pictures I've never seen, so thanks for that.